Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Armor of Truth Live number 381. Guess what Trump did today? Well, if you didn't know, like if you fell asleep or something, let's get that camera working. Hey, we got to have something, right? Something's got to be off. Trump signed an executive order today, right? And as if he hasn't, as if that's news, right? I don't know if that's really news, but this was supposed to be the executive order that, got rid of DEI, right? It restored meritocracy for the world, well, at least for the United States. That's the claim anyway. The problem is, I don't think that Trump is aware of what is really the greatest threat to America. Because if it's true, which we hear it all the time, that the children are our future, right? That's what we learned from Whitney Houston. That's what the prophet Whitney Houston taught us. But that is a fact, isn't it? The next generation will determine where our nation goes. And that generation right now is under intense indoctrination by a false religion. It is a religious worldview that they're being indoctrinated and inculcated with. And that's what we want to talk to you about a bit tonight. And we want to make this video for accessible to parents, people who are guardians over children, grandparents, some of you folks out there who are teachers, educators, experts in this field, people we've been watching here lately, the Reasons We Learn podcast. We appreciate the work over there. Common Core Diva. These are people we've discovered lately, and we would love for those people to be aware of what we're doing here because we're trying to support one another, and we believe that we bring a perspective here that might help ground a lot of the arguments people are making against this. So we hope to do our part here. Let's look at what's going on here with the mighty Trump machine. What I've got here for you is this is a tweet from Charlie Kirk, and this is pretty consistent with what we're seeing in response to Trump's most recent executive order. I guess this, he signed it yesterday. Yeah, but Charlie Kirk says, look at this, absolutely incredible. The new executive order from President Trump, titled Disparate Impact, or this idea of disparate impact, is the legal superweapon that is responsible for gutting merit-based hiring and is why all our companies think they have to have bogus DEI jobs and policies. Kirk says disparate impact should have been thrown out 40 years ago, and Trump is getting it done, finally. So what they're all referring to is the fact that during the Civil Rights Act, 1964, and before that, as the policies were being hashed out, this is what Kirk and a lot of people are referring to is the fact that, we've talked about this here before, right? What it did was it opened the door. The many good things came out of the Civil Rights Act. Let's just don't get that twisted. I don't want anybody hitting us up with hate for that. But, the idea here is that, do you trust your government with stuff? Do you really trust your government when it comes to giving them unlimited power? Well, see, that's the problem. Pardon me here for a second while I get this all worked out. See, the thing is, what happened with the Civil Rights Act was that racism was not ubiquitous. It wasn't something that was just all over the land, right? It was really kind of isolated into a couple areas in the Deep South. Pardon me. All this stuff. Professionals would do all of this stuff before the show. I wait until we go on the air because I'm like Evel Knievel. I like to live dangerously. Well, anyway. So the idea was this. The government said, hey, give us the power to override democratically elected officials, democratically voted on laws and policies. Give us the power to do that just this once, and we'll go down and we'll shut down all these oppressive laws. Now the thing is in the South, in these states where this is happening, the laws were voted on. There was a democratic process that put these in place. I'm not saying they're right, because look, people can vote for guys like Hitler. People can vote for guys like Saddam Hussein. I'm not saying that because they were voted for, they were right. I'm just saying that they were. And so what happened was there was an opportunity there for the federal government, and that was this. Give us the power. Just give us the power. Just for a little while. And we'll go down and we'll fix that racism. We'll knock back those racist laws, and then we'll put that genie back in the bottle and never do it again. And I think you know how that worked out. How many times has the government ever taken some power and not, and then given it back or restored it back to the way it was? So that's what they're talking about here. That's why they believe that this is a good thing, is because they think that what Trump has done here is he's ended the bad things that came out of the Civil Rights Act, which was discrimination in the other direction. All right, when you think of something like definitely a product of the Civil Rights Act gone mad. Anti-racism is just another word for racism. It's known as distributive justice, right? But that's not the topic for tonight. Topic for tonight is something much deeper and something we believe is more important that Trump and his whole administration seems to not be aware of. And if they are, they're not talking about it. And we know many people who could advise them on this, and we will certainly pray that that will be the case. Let me go ahead and welcome to the show lovely Summer. Say hello, lovely Summer.
Greetings and salutations to all of you people out there, you beautiful souls. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Beautiful souls. Summer, the master of the segue. Because that's exactly what we'll be talking about tonight is souls, right? Because self-identity is satanic. A series on reclaiming the soul was an article that was posted on our Substack earlier today. The soul grounds us in truth. Self-identity or synthetic selves or these people who are pushing identity doctrines, all that does is sever us from reality, okay? And that's the first article that Summer put out today, and then followed it up with this one because of the news stories today. UN Agenda in Disguise, SEL, which stands for Social Emotional Learning. It's in your public school right now, guaranteed. There's not many that it's not. STEM, Summer, you got to help me out with these acronyms. What do all these stand for?
Yes. All right. Let me get to my...
Well, STEM.
So, social emotional learning. You just said that. And basically, it's a way of ensuring that students from a very young age are conditioned into compliance to whatever the ideology is of the day that's state approved. So that's what SEL is. STEM comes next because it is the core educational framework around which globalist workforce training is built. Mm-hmm. STEM adds the arts, which introduces emotive storytelling, soft propaganda, and subjective interpretation into the technocratic system. And then STREAM is last because it is the most recent and religiously infused adaptation, and its meaning varies, religion versus reading. So there's different offshoots of that. With STREAM, it's either in the vein of religion or reading, which takes it to the tail end of the evolution.
Now, there's one reason that I think it might be, I was asking myself the question, why is it that Trump, I can't believe, I refuse to believe that Trump is not aware of this. I don't believe that he's.
It would seem to me to be, there's no way he couldn't be, he has to be aware of this.
Well, I have a sneaking suspicion that I know why. even if he did, even if it was a front burner issue for him, I believe I know why he might not be so willing to put the kibosh on this movement. And that's because of this. Let's see. Let me get back over here so you can see right there. So you can see this graphic that Summer has put with the article here. You can see it looks like a golfer. What's a golfer doing there? Well, I'll tell you what that golfer's doing there. The Tiger Woods Foundation is intimately, heavily involved in STEM, STEAM, SEL, and Tiger Woods and Donald Trump happen to be good friends. Eldrick, Tiger Woods, has been hanging out with Trump a lot lately. He's been seen there, especially he was there to support a celebration for Black History Month and other things. They've played golf a few times together. They're buddies, right? In fact, Tiger Woods is dating. I'm not sure if it's one of Trump's nieces. I believe that's what it is. So he's they're very good buddies. And see, the thing is, Summer, can you explain for us what it is that the Tiger Woods Foundation, what they're doing that's involved with this STEM? Because I believe this is why even if Trump knew about it, he's probably not going to do much about it because it's going to hurt a lot of his supporters.
Well, first of all, I do want to also add that people are probably wondering, what is STEM and what is
let's do that.
What is this? So STEM, STEAM are a Trojan horse for the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals. So STEM actually stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. So that's STEM. And then you have STEAM. You want to add arts. Mm-hmm. And they are UN-mandated education reforms designed to align with the Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 4 and 8 and 9. One is actually labeled like decent work, and then industry, innovation.
Decent work.
Yeah, decent work. In other words, approved sectors.
As opposed to indecent work, I guess.
I know. So, like SEL for social emotional learning programs, like one of the ways that we became aware of this is like noticing in our business center where there was like all these Dolly Parton billboards everywhere and these events that they would have and the Rotary Club and stuff. And it just all looked very, it just somehow gave off the vibe with how it was presented that this seems a bit dubious. So upon doing research, it did come forward that, indeed, SEL programs have been heavily endorsed by figures like Dolly Parton and Matthew McConaughey to condition children into global citizenship and behaviorally modify them. So we know that that's happening. Like Dolly Parton has this library event where they give books, and these are woke books that they're giving. This is how they're infiltrating the rural communities. And so Tiger Woods is one of the newest ones, and they're converting his golf course into an academy that's like essentially, it's like, also it has to be said that Tiger Woods is a Department of Defense ambassador and is used to draw attention. You don't say. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know this. Do
you think that the administration might be hesitant to for Trump to write an executive order shutting down all of this at once? I think So I think we can see why it might be that Trump might be a little slow on the draw here to take care of this stuff. I mean, because honestly, it's all the DEI stuff, right? That's what everyone knows. Those are terms people understand. Meritocracy, they that's simple enough for them to understand. Yeah. But they don't know.
It's kind of like the limited hangout, or the red herring. It's like, oh, look at this over here. I'm doing what I promised. I'm a good president. But meanwhile, there's this I don't know, like Brad and I in our community, we live in a small area in North Carolina, and it is so shocking because it really feels like overnight, like all of a sudden there's this new development and like there's this new kids daycare that's popped up that I looked online because I was like, oh no, this looks this looks sketchy. Like it's too nice and shiny and polished for our area. And like, sure enough, it's got the social emotional learning, and it's, I looked it up, and it's totally like uses all the language, and it's completely on board with this STEM program within our local community. And then within our own business center, we've got like 2 different events that are going on where this is UN. This is how it works. This is what it looks like. So, we wanted to really dive into this and let you guys also, we've created like a list of, terms for you to be aware of. Like if you see these catchphrases within your community, because they're targeting the kids from like cradle to grave. Mm-hmm. And they also, not just that, but they want to, come into your community. They're now at the point too where they're coming into the community, and we're going to show you a document that is like the agenda manual for how to infiltrate locally. And it literally is scary, but we'll get into the details later in the show on that. It's super interesting, but it's basically like, and then it's funny because you see, like I saw another article today from our favorite, The Atlantic, that we subscribe to keep an eye on things. And they were like, oh boy, Project 2025, because they really want people to just go, oh, Project 2025. Oh, Agenda 21. Oh, that must be the same thing. It's all stupid. No, it's not. It's Agenda 21. That's the one you need to pay attention to. It's not freaking Project 2025. That has nothing to do with anything that's going to be happening in our universe. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's where we're going tonight. And we want to open an invitation to anyone who is working on this topic. James Lindsay has been working on exposing SEL for a good while now.
Yeah, he's done some good videos with
The Reason We Learn, Deb Philman.
Yeah, The Reason We Learn with Deb Philman. Like
good
we
show.
Also in that article at the bottom, it's a really good interview about how like SEL is occult. Like it links back to Alice Bailey.
Right. And this is definitely right up our alley. This is in our wheelhouse. Also, the Common Core Diva, you might have her name actually. She does a lot of work with Sons of Liberty.
Lynn Taylor.
And so you can find a lot of information there too. What's her name again? Lynn Taylor?
Lynn Taylor.
Lynn Taylor and Deb Philman. Mm-hmm. These are a couple names you need to know because they're out there. There are more. We haven't found everybody yet. Well, a lot of people are like us, just sort of shadow banned, squashed, and kept away from the party. But we're not stopping. We're right here. We're going to keep going.
No. Both of those people, you can find that in the article that was published a few hours ago. So if you're interested in listening to those interviews, They are published at the end of the article.
Now, if we went through this topic for you on this show, we would be here for hours. So the way we're going to be handling this is it's going to be an ongoing narrative as we do our shows. We're going to be coming back to this regularly. This is going to be a major part of what we're doing because this is, I can't think of many things more important right now than Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development Goals for what they are and what they mean and what they want to do with the world. To have these same projects and policies present, subversively present within the school system, indoctrinating, inculcating, discipling your children into this false monistic worldview, false religion. That is the most important thing, right? We have to protect our next generation, or our next generation won't have any liberty left. All right.
Yeah, in fact, I was able to, like, looking into this, if this program that they're rolling out right now in our local communities in rural areas of the United States, if it is not interrupted by basically it's going to be Generation Beta that's going to be the first generation that's going to be truly entrenched in this. So that would be the generation beta is 2025 to 2039. So interesting to note that generation beta is 2025. That's the year that we're in. And so those people are going to be fully onboarded into this technocratic world order that will basically be to the point where they will completely get rid of any Christian worldview or faith-based organizations, or, you know what I mean? Like, that's all going to be phased out by then.
Well, that was the last show we just did. We did on Tuesday. We did the show explaining how Pope Francis and King Charles were specifically playing important roles, very distinct roles, not in the same way, not working together, but co-belligerent on the same purpose, and ultimately what Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, what all of this is there to do is to, and some of you who are not Christians might find this, to what I'm about to say, to be, I don't know, hysterical, but you have to understand. You have to understand. Your liberty, they want that's in their crosshairs, right? Your freedoms are definitely in their crosshairs, but it has to go deeper than that, because people can rise back up and create another version, of liberty, if they leave in place the Christian worldview, because it is the Christian worldview. If you study church history, if you study history, you'll find out that it was the Christian worldview that was at the heart of the American experiment, for example, of democracy in Europe. So when we say that it's ultimately the Christian worldview that they're coming for, I'm saying that they intend to turn everyone against the gospel, against the church. But they're not going to just say Jesus Christ was a liar. No, they're going to give you the alternate version, the Christ consciousness version of Jesus. That will be okay, as long as you don't say that Jesus is Lord only, then you'll be okay. There are going to be accepted versions of Christianity. We talked about all of that Tuesday night. You want to check that show out, especially the first hour. That's where we got into that in a deep way. So now before we get into some of the, we're going to, tonight at the end of the show, I'm going to go through, I want to tell you, let me just do this right now, because I want Summer to lead us through some of this other material here. The first thing I want to do before we get into this, I want to help us understand how it is. The question is, how do we begin to discuss these topics with our neighbors? Because ultimately, that's what we have to do. It doesn't do us any good to become experts in all of this if we just, sit on it. And that's why we mentioned to you these other people. Lisa Logan, James Lindsay, Deb Philman, and Lynn Taylor, the Common Core Diva. You need to look for these folks. Just start on Twitter. Start with the websites and Google. You'll find them. They're there, and they're doing good work. So we want to understand how it is that we go into our communities and we tell people about this, because that is what we're about to do here in our community. Now that we're fully aware of this system, and we've got 5 years of Christian ministry, apologetics, and polemic writing, and under our belts here, myself and my wife Summer, it's time for us to go into the community face to face. The Lord works that way. He'll prepare you. He'll set you out in the wilderness for a while and work with you and train you, and then He'll bring you into the front lines. And I think that that's where we're at now, because we've really found now an area where all of the talents that we've been given will actually come in very handy. This is almost second nature to us. But how do we begin to discuss topics like this with our neighbors? I want to make this clear. I want to help you out. Let me go ahead and get a... is that you, Sam? Did you have to pop out and come back in StreamYard? Yeah, there you go.
accidentally shut the screen down.
There you go.
Sorry.
It's okay. I've got you back on now. We can hear you again. Okay. Yeah, let me jump back in here now. I want to, while I share this information here, folks, or Summer, let me ask you, what's a good slide or a good section for me to have on the screen? I've got the definitions for SEL and STEM and STEAM and STREAM on the screen right now, but what do you think is a good?
What are you going to talk about? How are you going to start?
I'm going to talk about how we go about talking about these issues with our neighbors. What's the first thing we need to know as we go out and talk to our neighbor? Or if you just encounter someone, look, it's not just going to be your neighbors. It's not going to be the teachers and the administrators. It's going to be your neighbors. It's going to be your own family members. It's going to happen. So as I do that, I just want to go ahead.
Put the career clusters framework on there.
Okay, and is that in the first or second article from today?
That's the last one that I posted about
so
SEL and STEM.
All right, so that's this one.
Yeah.
Is this one you want?
Yep, that's it. So scroll down.
More?
Or, I'm in a time delay behind you.
Yeah, you're about
right?
20 seconds behind me there.
Not that one. But yeah, that one's good too. But actually the bigger one.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
I actually might have a separate one of those. There we go. The Nation Career Clusters Framework. There you go. Yes, I see what you're talking about now.
Yeah, just so people can see that, like, this is the plan. And so obviously you don't see anybody, there's no Christian organizations over there.
Yeah, let me fire in on that. Let me just push in on that a little bit so I can...
and the caring for communities.
Yeah, look at this. Here in the blue section, this is where all this other stuff is pretty much in the material world, right? This right here would be nature, and this is building and moving, creating and experiencing financial services. But here in the blue area, caring for communities. This is where the spiritual work is being done. This is where you would find the church or Christian ministry or something, but it's not there. That's because they have their own discipleship program. All right. So yeah, we'll leave this up there for you to study. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, and it's worth saying too that even with the most mundane of jobs, just the most sort of basic jobs, they're going to run it through an ideology filter. So you'll have to do all kinds of online programs to get your credentials to be accepted, and obviously you're going to have to be wokeified in order to perform those tasks, or else you won't be invited into this.
Wokeified, stupefied.
Yeah.
You're going to be sanitized, hypnotized, and neutralized, if I could say that. I'm trying to get this to line up on there in my screen.
I know, you're driving everybody crazy.
It's not working. I have to get away from the graphic before I can.
Oh my gosh.
Before I can resize it. There we go. Okay, that'll work, right? It'll have to work. This is the career clusters diagram. Now let me just explain to you guys. Let me jump over here for a minute, like this. How do we begin to discuss these topics? You have to love and honor the truth above everything else. Of course, everybody out there is going to claim to love the truth. And many confused people today claim to have their own version of truth to justify some pretty strange ideas. Drag queen story out. It's my truth. I live my truth. Right? Well, if you want to think clearly, you want to speak truthfully and resist the deceptive spirit of the age, then we need to recover something many in our culture have lost. And that is the importance of categories. Now, that might sound weird to you. That might not sound very important to you. And there's a reason for that. This is not taught or trained in school, especially now. Let me continue. And it is with the idea of categories. That's where you will encounter your first obstacle when you're reaching out to neighbors about this issue. The ones out there who are pushing identity doctrines at the street level have been trained to despise boundaries. All is one, they might say. You might hear them say that if you press them just a bit, if you talk to them very long. But that's a metaphysical claim. It's a metaphysical claim that that's consistent with theosophy, which is, if you've listened to James Lindsay at all, if you listen to Lisa Logan or any of these other folks we've mentioned, Deb Philman, Lynn Taylor, if you've listened to these people at all, you'll understand they're aware of this too. I want to take it a step deeper and help all of those folks, if I can, to understand what's necessary when you go out to engage these people. Because this, as Christian apologists, this is what we do. What we're trained to do is to engage people at the foundational worldview level. Because until you can establish some kind of ground on what is truth, or how are we going to agree on the terms we're using, then you can't have a coherent discussion. It's not going to go anywhere. You're not going to be successful. So this is where you encounter the first obstacle. You have to establish this boundary first. The ones out there that are pushing this on the street level, they've been trained to despise boundaries and categories. They'll tell you that all is one. They've been inculcated with this particular metaphysical worldview. They believe, they're taught to believe that the universe is all one. It's one undivided monad, that if you assert your individual dignity in some way, they're likely to scoff at you. They're likely to call you arrogant. They'll probably call you a fascist today, which has no relevance. Again, they use, how do you say it, Summer? We use the same words, but we have a different dictionary. And that's kind of how Marxism and cultural or Western Marxism works.
Same words, different vocabulary.
Yeah, that's right.
Like different definitions. Same vocabulary, different definition.
So that's it. And so this is how we avoid running into that problem. Okay? Pay close attention just for a couple minutes with me here. What they must believe to hold this worldview that underpins all of these beliefs, they have to believe that spirit and matter, that God and man are all one undivided being, one undivided thing, one undivided creation. That's the foundation of all this. Really, from Agenda 21 to 2030 to identity politics to the linguistic befuddlement of sexual orientations, here's an example. You'll hear sexual orientation mentioned in SEL. You'll hear it mentioned in all this. It is not. Sexual orientation doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. You might think that sounds crazy. I'll be happy to go into more detail into that with you. Just someone express an interest in that in the chat or in the comments, and I'll be happy to go into more detail on why sexual orientation and a term like conversion therapy, these are made-up terms that don't actually represent anything that's happening in reality. All right, and maybe this will help you understand why that's the case. So from all of these agendas, gender confusion, to the Disrespect for Marriage Act, to the mad rise of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, to transgender story hour, to social and emotional learning, to well-being councils, to my truth versus your truth. The first truth you need to know when you're preparing to defend your children or defend our nation, when you're preparing to defend our way of life from the madness of our cultural adversaries in high places, is this. Our local leaders, school board members, our councilmen and women, especially our esteemed interlocutors on the debate stage or in the debate arena, as well as our professional colleagues, and in many cases, our friends, our loved ones, and even our family members. Those who have bought into these preposterous preparations have been trained to despise logical categories. But categories are a necessary precondition for all truth claims. This means that in your state, everyone from the governor to the dog catcher From the school superintendent to your best friend, maybe your husband or wife, maybe your son or daughter, certainly your son and daughter if they're in school now, has been subversively trained to despise the truth. Because they're trained to ignore categories, they're trained to despise categories. That means they've been trained to despise the truth, the objective truth. Now, this is the result of decades of social engineering, right? It's the capture of America's most important institutions, including, in many cases, education and religion, which is made possible when the first category. Now, I want to slow down. And just for a moment, I want to come in here like this just for a moment. Can I remind everyone, by the way, that this QR code you see on your screen, it'll take you to armorup.live. If you'd like to donate to us live during the show, you want to put a comment up on the screen, you can do that. If you don't want to have your name on, you don't have to type a name in. You have the option. But this is a way for you to support us live while we're on the air. And we have plenty of ways for you to support us in the description below this video as well. And we certainly need your support because we don't get really. We got $20 worth of ad revenue from YouTube this year, so we depend on you. Categories are a necessary precondition for all truth claims. This means that in your state, everybody that works in some kind of state job has been trained to ignore them, to even despise them. And this has happened through decades of social engineering. The capture of America's most important institutions, including in many cases education and religion, which was made possible when this first category, the first absolute binary, which is the creator-creature distinction, was confused. Understand what I'm saying. I am referring back to the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, if you're not Christian or religious, this is going to apply to you too, because it's biblically true and it's logically true. So pay attention. The very first absolute binary happened in the first act of creation, when the creator-creature distinction. And how this has been lost, you see, this is why we're not all one. All right. The reason this has been lost, and the reason people think we're all one, and the reason the SEL and all of these doctrines have been able to get a foothold in America where they wouldn't have 100 years ago, is because this creator-creature distinction has been confused. And the reason for that is because it's been lost as Eastern mysticism was imported and blended with the Western ideal, the Western individualism. It's as if today in America, the prevailing religious idea, let me just say, the prevailing spiritual notion in America today, and this includes most of the Christian church, it's as if Deepak Chopra and Captain America adopted an Indian child or a child from Nepal and named her My Democracy. It's a confusion. Categories are not optional. Categories are boundaries. They're fences that God has built into creation to help us understand what is and what is not, what must never be confused. Categories are foundational to all knowledge. Categories are absolutely necessary for any coherent discourse. So you can see why. If you want to confuse discourse so that no one can really understand one another, take away categories. Confuse that first absolute binary, the creator-creature distinction. That's why we must maintain that very first category on which all other categories depend, that creator-creature distinction. In the beginning, God didn't create a blur of being. He didn't create some disparate source energy. He created distinctions. He began not by crafting matter, but by establishing a metaphysical boundary. He alone is God, and everything else is creation. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The first sentence in the Bible affirms the most radical and necessary distinction in all of existence. God is not the universe. It's illogical to say that God is the universe cannot create itself. Nothing can create itself. You're violating every law of physics when you say that or try to affirm that. The universe is not God, and God is not the universe. God is eternal, uncreated, and transcendent. Everything else, angels, including angels, animals, atoms, are all finite, dependent, and made. That means they're created. So this distinction is not just theological, it's epistemological. That means epistemology is the study of how we know what we know, the study of truth. So without this distinction, you cannot have truth and morality or meaning. So when you lose categories, when categories are blurred, you lose meaning. This is why people have such a hard time debating these issues back and forth. Without logical categories, which is to say biblical categories, you cannot understand or successfully defend what you say you believe is true. So if you go out in the community and you're trying to establish why this method is wrong and dangerous, the person standing across from you has been trained in a different worldview, and as far as anyone's concerned watching, it's just two tribes arguing about what they feel should be right. You can't win that argument. I mean, you could come away victorious, but you haven't achieved anything. You've just said, hey, my tribe won the argument, but you haven't established any kind of foundational truth with that person. Modern ideologies like the ones behind this are collapsing this boundary, from SEL to theosophy, from radical environmentalism to identity politics. We're witnessing a return to cosmological monism. That is the ancient pagan idea that all is one, that God is in everything, and that all distinctions are illusions, and that what we really have to do is overcome the illusions. We do that by overcoming distinctions. Once the creator-creature distinction falls, all categories begin to dissolve. Male and female, good and evil, sin and sickness. You can't define sin anymore. And, of course, the category of God and man. So when everything becomes one, then everything becomes nothing, and power becomes the only truth. Did you hear that? Whenever this is allowed to go uncriticized, when we accept their language uncritically, when everything is allowed to be called one, then everything becomes nothing. And the only truth at that point is power. Who has more of it? They're the ones who will be in control. So what you need to know first and foremost as you go out into the world to deal with this is a category error. You have to be able to recognize a category error and call people on it. A category error occurs when someone confuses two fundamentally different kinds of things, treating them as if they belong to the same group. This is a logical fallacy. These are things that are not taught in school anymore. So people don't recognize this right away, but you can show them. It's not hard to understand. But more than a logical fallacy, what it really is spiritual confusion. People don't know who they are, right? When someone doesn't know the difference between themselves and God, they think God is within them. They think they are God. Well, that's spiritual confusion. Here's just a couple examples. You've heard it probably said, love is love, right? Well, that phrase sounds virtuous. It sounds tolerant, but it's a profound category error. Biblical love is holy, sacrificial. It's bound by God's moral law, Romans 13:10. erotic attraction or emotional desire is not the same thing as godly love. So to treat all love is love, as equal is to collapse the moral category that defines what love is, and to make approval of sin seem like a virtue. Example 2, again, let's go to this term conversion therapy. Nowhere in Christianity, nowhere in the Bible is the term conversion used to explain what happens to a person when they become a Christian. I mean at the metaphysical level, when they really become a Christian, because the biblical term is regeneration. We went into more depth on this in the last show, if you'd like to hear that. The world accuses Christians of practicing something like conversion therapy, right? Do no such thing. I mean, certainly some people may involve themselves in this, but that's not Christianity. As if the church is offering a psychological behavior modification. That's conversion, behavior modification. That's not what Christians do. That's not Christian ministry. And so conversion therapy, when you apply it to Christianity, is a category error. The Bible teaches regeneration. It's a divine act by which God gives a sinner a new heart, Ezekiel 36:26. Therapy is human effort. Behavior modification is human effort. Regeneration is divine grace. When you confuse the two, you turn salvation into self-help, and you turn grace into coercion. We've talked to you here a lot lately about the grace and nature dichotomy. All right, it's philosophers have worked for millennia to offer a unified field of knowledge. How can we bring the transcendent and the immanent together, grace and nature, the unseen and the seen together? Well, as it turns out, all they ended up doing was ignoring grace and bringing everything down into the physical realm. And that's what we see with this kind of a worldview, this kind of a system, SEL and STEM. Everything is brought down into the laboratory where it can be measured, where it can be analyzed. This is the heart of technocracy. Rule by experts. Rule by measurements. All right. When you confuse conversion and regeneration, you turn salvation into self-help. So if you profess to be a Christian, you can't even understand salvation if you confuse the creator with the creature. That's Romans 1:25. You can't explain sin if you forsake its proper category. Sin is not a peccadillo. Sin is not a shortcoming. Sin is not a disease. It's not a cultural trait. You can't define the church if you confuse it with a fraternity, a social service, or an organization. Isaiah 5:20 says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness." Isaiah 5:20. That's true wisdom. So what we see happening in these policies that Summer's going to run through with us here in just a moment is a reversal of truth. And in order to reverse the truth, in order to do what Summer just said, to have the same words and different definitions, you have to call evil good and good evil. You have to redefine the terms. You need to collapse all the categories and reestablish them in the way you want them. That's exactly what's happening today. Why? Why is the enemy obscuring categories? This is the heart of the matter. Because when you destroy categories, you destroy discernment. And unless you hold someone accountable to logical categories, they can say anything they want. And it's just my truth. But if male and female are fluid, then family is meaningless. If you allow them to have this language, then you can't argue and defend the family. If child and adult are blurred, then sexual boundaries are erased. And you might not like it, and you might know in your heart that it's evil for an adult and a child, you know. But you can't make an argument against it unless you have a coherent, absolute, transcendent moral truth, a category. If sin and mental health are conflated, then repentance is replaced with therapy. And that's exactly what this system is. SEL, social emotional learning, is really just therapy in your school system. And what it is, it's a way to disciple the children into a new religion without violating the First Amendment, because they use scientific language. If God and man are one, then there's no need for a Savior. Now, who do you think would want to push that doctrine? Category confusion is not neutral, my friends. It's tactical. It's deliberate. It's a deliberate move by these ideologues, these revolutionaries, and these false teachers to smuggle in destructive agendas under the guise of progress, inclusion, or care. It's what Francis Schaeffer warned about. He said the world brings everything spiritual down into the realm of nature, down into the realm of feelings and chemical impulses. Chemical imbalance. There's another one for you. Is there a hair test? Is there some kind of blood test or pee test or poop test? No, it's just a chemical imbalance that... What? How do you know? No, it's just there. It's chemical imbalance. Did you know you're feeling a little blue? It's chemical imbalance. Here's the response. Here's the answer. Let me give you a chemical to balance your chemical imbalance. How many years now have we bought that ridiculousness? They call all of that truth because they've destroyed the categories. But once you reduce man to mere matter, once you turn man into a machine, you open the door to transhumanism, technocracy, well, you make man moldable by power. All right. So when we allow these people to obscure categories, we have to understand that God is not the author of confusion. Anyone who's offering you a confusion, you immediately know what side of the game that they're on, even if they don't mean to be, and even if they're not really aware of it. Even if it's your best friend or your sister or your brother-in-law or your son who just got the big job in the school system, if they're talking about this stuff as though it's the right way to go, they're offering a confusion and they're working for the other team. They're working for the enemy. The enemy. And if you don't believe, then they're working for they're working against your liberty. They're working against truth. The first act of creation and the distinctions that followed defined reality. Light and darkness, land and sea, male and female, human and animal, holy and profane. These are not man-made constructs, but chemical imbalance, sexual orientation. These are man-made linguistic constructs, and that's all they are. But what God created were divine categories that never change. And when we ignore these categories, or worse, when we blur them for political, social, or greedy gain, then we lose meaning. We lose the meaning of what we're doing here, why we're here. We lose the very foundation of coherent interaction. We lose the ability to even debate with one another. We lose track of what morality is. Have you heard people say, morality evolves as culture needs it to evolve? That's nonsense. If murder is wrong yesterday, it's going to be wrong tomorrow also. By the renewing of your mind. When the world around you is collapsing into this idea of oneness, this cosmological monism, when it's collapsing into ideological chaos, this is how you can respond. Your duty is to recover the first truth, that original distinction. That's the same duty we've always had. That's the Great Commission. That's the first step. Go, therefore, and teach them all that Jesus commanded, starting with God is God and you're not. That's our starting point, and that is our stronghold, my friends. That is how we can win. That is the first step. That's the front line of this battle. Okay, now, Summer, please take us into the document you want us to be in, and let's go there. And now let's think about all that Summer's going to show us, that, and let's think about this in terms of categories. While you're queuing up what you need, Summer, let me show the folks the article from Governor Stein. Okay.
Okay.
Governor's Advisory Council here. Look at this. This is in North Carolina, all right? This is where we live. It's also where the Common Core Diva lives, I believe, down in Mooresville, a couple hours from here. Closer to the governor than us. Governor's Advisory Council for Student Safety and Well-Being, all right? Key terms. I think Summer has some key terms for you today as well. They're in these articles, too. These articles are much greater detail than you'll get here in these videos because we don't have all day to be on the video. All right, well-being is one of those terms. In April 2025, Governor Josh Stein established via executive order, right, executive order, the Governor's Advisory Council for Student Safety and Well-Being. Let me show you what some of the things that Stein has said here.
Can I just say that I think our audience is really schooled in this, but I mean, when they say well-being, they're talking about communism. They're talking about Club of Rome. They're talking about the closed technocracy that we're now in. This is the new economy. So well-being is code for New World Order, essentially. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. Well done. Definitely. Let's listen to what Governor Stein says in this message here. In his tweet here, he says, nothing is more important than keeping our students safe. No, that's the parents' job. Now, we certainly do have a reasonable expectation that the school is not going to allow crazy people to come walking in and walking around naked. And see, this is what drives me batty sometimes. Nothing's...
What this means, to keeping them safe, means keeping them under control.
Yes, security.
That's what it means.
Let's explain. Go ahead.
Keeping them ideologically controlled and subdued, that's what safe means.
Absolutely. That's perfect, because there's one mantra that we try to continue to give here. Whenever you hear the word safe or security, just remember that the most safe and secure people in the world are in prisons, right? They have everything brought to them that they need. They sleep behind bars. The world can't get to them. They might attack one another, but they are secure, aren't they? Secure meaning that they can't go and do as they wish. That means they're no longer free. So when they say safety, they mean security. Sometimes they'll say security, and that's really what it means.
Yeah, I have a little story for that, just to illustrate the point.
Go ahead.
Because many of you know that I lived in Indonesia, and it was widely known that the Singaporeans, when they would come to the island, they were just notorious for getting in these terrible accidents and drowning a lot. The statistics on the Singaporeans drowning in the ocean. Why is that? Because they came from a highly controlled environment. Singapore is one of the most advanced, if not the most advanced cities in the world. And everything is regulated so tightly, like where you can cross the road and, how fast you can drive your car. Everything is regulated. So they're used to that. And then when they get into Indonesia, it's like the Wild West for them. It's not so much that way anymore. But they just couldn't handle it because they didn't have all of those guardrails. And they literally, the statistics don't lie. They got into dangerous situations. So that's another situation where that applies.
Yeah, definitely. It sure does.
Where a society that's so controlled, that's so monitored and controlled and told what to do. They don't know how to handle themselves outside of that matrix.
Does that not sound familiar? Especially when we've been listening to Deb Philman and I keep forgetting Lynn. I can just think of Common Core Diva. What's her name again? Lynn. Well,
yeah, Lynn Taylor.
Lynn Taylor. So we've been listening to them lately, and I think it's Deb Philman who does one-on-one preparation for kids graduating from high school or going into college to help them prepare. One of the things she mentioned to help them to write you have to write an essay, explaining, well, why do you want to go here? Tell us about yourself. And the kids can't do it. It's something they can't do because they have been trained to not think of themselves in that way. They're trained to think of the collective. So when they're asked to talk about themselves, they always repeat the groups that they belong to. Right? It's kind of like what we were just talking about earlier today. When you watch people go out to these events where they're having an anti-Trump rally or a pro-Trump rally, but typically when it's progressives or leftists, and you're there and you're the opposition, one of the things you'll hear people say is, we heard this one man say this the other day. He was so offended that person was even there, wearing a MAGA hat or something. And the first thing he said, he had to qualify, as a trans woman, I believe, blah, 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 blah. I'm disgusted by you or whatever. You have to announce what group you belong to, not your name. Well, not where you're from, but what group you belong to, So, but let's listen to this Governor Josh Stein as he announces the Governor's Advisory Council on Student Safety and Well-Being. He says, together we can create safe classrooms where our students flourish and succeed. Definitions for these terms are lacking. Flourish in what? Succeed in what? It's kind of like when vaccines say they're safe and effective. For what? Let's listen to this. Let's listen for some language.
I'm creating today an advisory council on student safety and well-being. I'm pleased that Senator Batch, Deputy Secretary Lassiter, and our 2024 Teacher of the Year, Heather Smith, who's in Haywood County, she's teaching today, couldn't be here, are going to co-chair this council. They will be joined in this effort by legislators, leaders from our public school system, mental health professionals, public safety officers, and others, because all of us have a role to play in the safety and well-being of North Carolina school children. Nothing is more important than keeping our students safe.
Bam. Nothing's more important than keeping our students safe. So immediately, and it's probably enough out of him anyway.
This is so Orwellian.
It is. Now,
when they say peace and safety.
Yeah, I've got the wrong article up there, but I've got another one here.
I mean,
let's see.
it drives me insane.
Yep, I know. Let me. I've got to jump. I need to find the other article, or the other source, because I don't have the full one up there, because you can see the language. I want to show you a couple other things he says there.
By the way, I just want to remind our audience that, we voted for Mark Robinson, and what Stein and his people did to Mark Robinson is absolutely atrocious. Yeah. And, not that we could say that we're surprised, but I mean, every allegation that they made against Mark Robinson was just a complete fictitious lie. And sadly, that's all it took, Yeah. And so just wanted to put that out there. Shout out to Mark Robinson.
Well, that's how you win elections today. You just who's got more money and who's going to be more vicious. This is frustrating because I still can't find that article that had the full. All right. Anyway, the language. I just wanted you to see the language that was in the article.
Is it in your history?
I don't know. Here's
it probably would be in your history.
Here's an article of one of those who was put on the council. Now, there are psychologists, there are law enforcement, attorneys on this. Maybe this is the press release. Yep, this is the Presley's. Good. I found it through her. Okay, good. Let me bring it over here so we can see it better. All right, so as you can see here, let's just look at this language. See, North Carolina's children are our future. Again, Whitney Houston's back. And he says, and it's crucial that they grow and learn in safe environments. So right in the first sentence, you know that some sort of psychology-trained writer, maybe a psychologist, someone who knows how to manipulate the mind, has written this, because right off the bat they tell you it's crucial. Right off the bat they're setting the tone that this is an existential crisis, that we have to do this. I mean,
and there it is right there. Every child in North Carolina deserves the freedom to learn in a secure, supportive environment. I mean, come on.
Yeah, which is that in the second paragraph? I need to find that.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, starting off here, ensuring the safety of our students is not up for debate. Really? Mm-hmm. Really? If they say, anything they say that's not up for debate, you need to make sure that it is debated, right? Because they're just assuming that, oh, well, who's going to disagree with the safety of our students, right? But well, this term safety is the problem. This
is the way, though, that they communicate that it's not optional. Like this very much, you know what I mean? Like it's like flat. Yeah, I mean,
right there they say
this is not optional.
Yeah, here he's saying it's the fundamental responsibility of our state government. No, it's not. It's not the fundamental responsibility of the state government to come in and implement well-being policies in the local schools. Yeah, right there's what Summer said. Every child in North Carolina deserves the freedom to learn in a secure, supportive environment. So, secure. Now, what that means, look who's saying it. Democratic leader Sidney Batch. We'll come down in a minute. We'll get Deputy Secretary of Public Safety William Lassiter says something similar here, saying student and school staff security and well-being, he's been trained well, is an essential part of public safety. What this means is the schools will be like little prisons, little day prisons. And we did a video here, and I don't know, Summer, if we can find that link.
Well,
you remember the video about Gaggle? We need to
look at the. Well, wait a minute. Stay there, because it says, "I'm proud to be co-chair of this council and committed to advancing real enforceable policies." Great, real and more. Letting you know that this is enforceable. This is going to be mandatory. This is not up for debate. This is going to be enforced, and you know you're going to love it.
There you go. Good catch, Summer. It's not up for bait. It's not up for debate. It's not up for debate. Give me the debate and the
not up for debate.
And so it's not up for debate, right? And it is real and enforceable, and not up for debate. Well, that's not what you want to hear your government officials saying. But of course, when they come out and they say, "Oh, but it's this," it's about the safety of our students. You wouldn't disagree with that, would you? You couldn't possibly disagree with that. It's kind of like they have a different vocabulary, like the same vocabulary with different definitions of that vocabulary. So this is that, this is the way that they signal to one another. It's like the bat signal. Yeah. It's like, okay, this is our new, new speak. This is our new living language that we're united under the Georgia Guidestones that we destroyed. This is the new living language. This is what we're going to be referring to in our work from here on. We have started to build a big database of these terms.
We have,
and it will define the terms for you, what they mean by them, and it's going to have it's going to give you the term like resilience, or emotional awareness, or whatever it is. It'll have those terms, and then it will have the definition, and it'll have the masking language that you'll hear them use. And then we'll also have a biblical, a proper categorical response to what they've said. So we'll put what they've said in its proper category. That way you know exactly what it is they're saying. Because when you hold their language up to the proper category, meaning its right definition, then you start to see more clearly what it is they're saying. So this goes on. Now, I wanted to point this part out to the Deputy Secretary of Public Safety, William Lassiter, who oversees the Division of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. I imagine he's got some reform schools under his jurisdiction. I don't know if they have those anymore, but he says we must use the tools at our disposal. Tools, surveillance, cameras, metal detectors, whatever. The tools to upgrade the physical infrastructure of our schools, and then to train our staff how to recognize and respond. So this means that they're going to upgrade the schools with cameras, surveillance equipment, facial recognition. Oh, they're going to train kids to be used to this right from the first day of school. And they're going to train school staff how to recognize and respond to the early warning signs. Now, you're going to have people who are not trained in criminal justice, maybe not trained in these kind of things at all, but these groups are going to run them through like a 10-hour training, and they're going to be experts at it, and they're never going to get it wrong. They're not ever going to get this wrong, of course, right? They're going to be trained to recognize public safety threats, meaning students who aren't doing what they're supposed to, students who aren't participating in a particular event or activity, right? Working together, we can keep our students and schools safe. We know our students must feel safe. So now here's another point, and then I will move away.
The redundancy, too, like me being a copywriter, I mean, it drives me insane because, like, the redundancy of terms, I'm like, get a thesaurus, but they don't, because why? Because it's like a magical spell. It's like a mantra. It's like the same words over and over again.
It's definitely a magical spell. That's absolutely what it is in a lot of senses. It's meant to kind of lull you to sleep, and so you'll accept it. Now, I'll finish up with this, and then we need to get over to these articles. Lassiter here, you remember? Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Officer. Says we listen to this particular claim made by this guy and then Teacher of the Year. We know our students must feel safe. Students must feel safe. They must have a healthy mental well-being in order to achieve academically. You must feel safe in order to learn. You must be happy before you can learn. That's the presupposition. Now here the Teacher of the Year comes back and says, what I've seen in my classroom is that if students don't feel safe, if they're not supported, whatever that means, it could mean anything, it's much harder for them to learn. There you go. If they don't feel safe, it's much harder for them to learn. So the question is, again, let's go back to, we're talking about looking at this stuff reasonably and logically, using proper categories. Is that true? Is it true? Like, what category do they have the word safe in? Because when I think safe, I mean, we're thinking they're not going to get harmed, by a falling ceiling tile. That would be keeping them safe. Keeping them safe would also mean something like, we're not going to allow strippers to come in and get naked and read to them. That's what I mean. That's what I think when they say they're going to keep students safe. But clearly that's not what they mean. Obviously it's not. So the question is, logically, is it true that students have to be happy, that they have to feel safe, they have to be free from all trauma before they can learn? And I believe I heard the ladies talking about this on the show yesterday, and I wanted to repeat it because it's an excellent point. There's really no data to show that that's true. Students in Afghanistan, students in Syria, students in places, war-torn places, students who live in low-income, hard environments, they can all learn. In fact, some kids who live in those environments look forward to coming to school to get away from those some kind of hard or oppressive or a dangerous environment, whatever the economic situation is. So these are just claims. they're not really, no data is really offered. And I think if you look and you follow up on the data with these, you're going to find that they're using this language because they know the people who are going to read this probably are only going to be parents. That's intended for parents. It's intended to make parents feel like, oh boy, we're looking out for your kids. We're really going to keep them safe.
Well, they're trying to disarm parents. They're trying to put something forward that disarms them to just, oh, this is fine, like nothing going to be happening here to look at.
Well, Summer, does all this safety work? I mean, over the last 10, 20 years, we've seen police officers be put into the schools, like a school resource officer, and we've got all this safety going on. And I guess we should expect that students are more safe today. Is that the case?
That's what we were talking about. I was like, this SEL program has been running since 1994, full throttle, and obviously things are not more safe today in schools.
No, they're not.
But also we know a lot of those school events are not like what they say they are. But anyway, you know what I mean?
Definitely not. There's something fishy about a lot of the violence that happens in schools for sure. And look at this. This is not a progressive or a democratic issue. This is across party lines, right? Student safety and well-being is a bipartisan issue. They are all in favor of it. This is why you need to be active. Christians are called to be active in their local government. Your local government is where you can have an impact. You need to tell your local leaders. You need to tell your local city council. You need to take this kind of information to them. You need to tell your congressmen and your senators that you're not voting for them if they go vote for this nonsense. Okay, Summer, take us through. I kind of want to go through this first one you released. I want you to go through this one, the second one you released. It's got all the info about. Now, we want to make sure that people come here and read this, so let's don't give it all away. We want to make them come read this because this is where all the detail is. So tell me where you want me to go in here.
Yeah, well, since we've been talking about this school situation pretty heavily, we can go into the UN agenda in disguise. And go ahead and scroll down. Well, first of all, just scroll down to the first picture.
That one. Right?
Yeah.
A little delay. Yeah, I've got the systemic SEL is the path to the UN's utopia. I've got Lynn's.
Okay, and to the next one.
Okay. Here's some of the variants. Let's see here. Summer's also got this document that she's been reading and pulling this info from, the K-12 STEM education and workforce development in rural areas document that she said is actually frightening. It's a horrifying document. You can come here and you can download it for yourself and see why it's so frightening. All right.
Yeah, I mean, basically what's happening is that this document, the K-12 STEM education and workforce development in rural areas, we've provided that for you. You can download it like Brad just said. And this report cloaks neo-extractive strategies, with feel-good language, as we know how they do. And so basically, I'm just going to give you a little, the highlights of what I've been able to determine is the K-12 STEM education and workforce development document is not about uplifting communities. It's about reprogramming them. This agenda trains children to adopt UN-defined values, detaches them from faith, family, and land, and funnels them into predetermined roles within the global technocratic system. It creates not citizens, but compliant workers engineered from a young age to serve the demands of the SDG-aligned bioeconomy and surveillance state. Collapse of traditional education, teachers as technocratic agents. The report recommends retraining educators to adopt globalist-aligned pedagogy and curriculum, especially in CTE, career and technical education. Teacher shortages are exploited to replace classical education with digitally delivered workforce aligned content, weakening community-based knowledge transmission. This is not about helping rural students to thrive. It's about transforming America's rural heartland into a compliant workforce engine for the global biodigital economy, stripped of the biblical worldview, national sovereignty, and local self-sufficiency. Unless Christians, parents, and local leaders recognize this as a spiritual and ideological invasion, the soul of rural America will be surrendered, not with a bang, but with a broadband signal and a smiling STEM internship coordinator. Resource mapping and extraction. So it doesn't just stop at trying to indoctrinate the kids like from daycare. What Brad and I have said, we've seen one of these daycares pop up. We've got offices that are in our building that we work out of that have facilities that are working these programs. The K-12 STEM document covertly reveals a resource mapping agenda under the banner of community asset identification and place-based learning. This is clearly about assessing rural America, not just for human capital, but for exploitable material, environmental, and infrastructural resources, all for the integration into the UN-aligned global economy. So not only it's kind of like the ideas with Mao's China, what we know about what happened with the Cultural Revolution there, how they would send the cadres in to spy on communities to get to know and befriend people, like basically come in and trick people like, we're your friend and we want to make your life better. But really what they're doing is that they'll send people in there to learn like what is worth extracting from that community or how they can exploit those grievances and turn it into these global citizens, right? Mm-hmm. So the rural STEM program they're Trojan horses for surveying the land, for determining what sort of resources would be valuable, and basically figuring out a clever way to take them and, so to control them and take them and harvest them. So that harvesting is both with people and land for Agenda 2030. The STEM map reports, report maps and manages the rural workforce. So this document is not just about education, it's about centralizing control over which jobs will exist in rural communities and ensuring that future generations are only qualified to work within pre-approved, ideologically compliant sectors. It ensures schools train for the economy. It ensures schools train for the economy the state approves of, not the one that the community needs or values. Not anything that the community needs or values. That's just not going to be part of the game. This filters out traditional, independent, faith-based, or land-rooted careers, replacing them with technocratic roles defined by SDG compliance. We're almost to the end, folks. Hang on.
Which I've lost you. Did you continue from that paragraph? I didn't want to lose so that people could read along. After the OECD stuff, I'm at the A&B Child Care in North Carolina as a textbook. I'm there. Am I in the right place?
You're too far down.
Okay.
So go to resource mapping and extraction operation.
All right. Yeah, I'm there. I got you.
Okay, and then you'll see the STEM report maps and manages for rural workforce. So we're almost to the end. We'll discuss in a second. This means Christian-based vocations, family business, succession, or trades outside of the SDG framework will be phased out or deprioritized. The bottom line is the report is a blueprint for replacing economic freedom with workforce programming. Rural children won't grow up to serve their communities. They'll be conditioned to serve the global machine. The only jobs available will be those that fulfill the metrics of a post-Christian woke world order. So I wanted to also state that what this means, like how far off in the game could this potentially be? Like right now, Generation Alpha is the experimental cohort, and then Generation Beta, like I said, who is being born right now in 2025, is the product. So again, if we don't sound the alarm and resist now, the globalist education to compliance model will be baked into the culture by 2030 or 2035, perfectly in line with the UN's Agenda 2030 targets. So I just wanted to outline that because that's what's inside of that K-12 STEM education document. And it's really alarming. Like this is the, and then you've got, like I said, the Atlantic, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's a fascist, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And Project 2025. No, this is Agenda 21 right here.
You know who that's intended for? It just hit me again. I know you know this already because we talk about it a lot. But now it just occurred to me. You said that Generation Alpha, they're how'd you say they're the what?
Generation Alpha is the experimental cohort.
And Generation Beta, the one that's being born right now, they're the product. Okay, yes. So now think about that group right there, the group that's being born right now. Okay, we've brought this up to you a few times now already by saying, like, articles like I forgot what the reporter's name, you'll probably remember it somewhere, over at the Atlantic, the lady who, Ann Applebaum.
Yes.
She hasn't written anything true in the past, I don't know how many years. But we know what they're doing. They're not writing articles for people to read and absorb today, although a lot of weak-minded people do take that information in. They're writing articles. Now I get it. I believe for that generation Beta that's being born now, who will be the product, all of this that's being taught is that group, when they come of age, they'll look back in the history and they'll see, look at what all the Atlantic wrote. Wow, look how awful it was before we had this great SEL, before we had all this emotional.
Yeah, that's definitely. We've brought that up for the last couple of years now. That it's like they bring in the best camera crew, and they bring in the best photographers, and they pay their movie actors, aka their activists, and they go and they put on a show for everybody to pretend that this is what's happening in reality, when everybody knows that this is just a ruse, that this is just fake. It's not really how things are.
Yep. I like this here, the article, or the part in the article where it's talking about the what Trump had done today with his executive order. Disparate impact is a problem, but it's not the problem. It's just a politically expedient problem that really looks good when you get rid of it. Someone writes here, the real war is cultural, ideological, psychological, and it's local. Forget about Trump. Forget about all that the circus. You need to be paying attention to what's happening right at home. Unless we stop the quiet embedding of SEL, STEAM, and STEM pipelines into every level of society, from daycares to rural workforce programs, executive orders will be little more than symbolic empty gestures against the machine that's already in motion. And in fact, that's what most of the EOs Trump is writing today are. They are really just symbolic empty gestures until Congress can codify these things. They don't really have any teeth or any force. They just make it look good and everybody's happy. And over here, Charlie Kirk is so excited today. But until this thing is law, it's just a party. Doesn't mean anything yet. All right.
I want you to keep, let's see.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, just cruise down through there, some of those points.
Find that next, find the next point you'd like to drill down on. And while you do that, let me just give this. You mentioned the word pedagogy. Go ahead and look for your next point. I want to share this piece right here. Pedagogy. You heard her read the word pedagogy there. Now, it just means the method, practice, and scope of instruction or teaching. You're going to encounter it often when you look through this material, these technical training documents. You'll hear it a lot if you go to these meetings and listen in. It's important to understand that this term refers not only to what is taught. Again, this word has a bigger definition today. It also refers to how teaching is being delivered. It also refers to the values and the assumptions and the worldview that shape the entire educational process. pedagogy. You'll hear it a lot. In other words, pedagogy is the art of forming students, mind, heart, and soul. What is it we see in Deuteronomy 6:4 and that Jesus repeats in the New Testament? And the two greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and strength. Heart, mind, and soul. Pedagogy is the art of forming students' mind, heart, and soul. And it's never neutral. None of this is neutral. They want you to think it's neutral, but it's not neutral. You don't have the option of opting out of this stuff. Every method of education carries an implicit vision of what it means to be human, what it means to live well, and who or what is ultimate. And here's the most important part. A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. Students aren't just absorbing facts. They're being shaped to resemble their teachers, their values, and worldviews, and loves. So that's the word of warning. Your kid is going to spend 14,000 hours in public education if you send them there. That's 14,000 hours of pedagogy. That's 14,000 hours of worldview training or discipleship from these people. While the average Christian family spends less than 30 minutes per week discussing spiritual matters at home. Who's going to win? Who's going to win that war? If the system that forms your child's mind and heart is secular, collectivist, or therapeutic in its vision of the world, then your child will be shaped accordingly. As Voddie Baucham said, if we continue to send our children to Caesar for their education, you need to stop complaining and being surprised when they come home as Romans. Education is discipleship. That is the point. Choosing your child's pedagogy is choosing the future of their soul. And that's why we want to title this video the way we did. What about the children? Why isn't Trump recognizing the battle for your children's soul that's happening every day? Okay, so show me where I need to be next in this article, because this is good stuff here. I'm telling you folks, again, I'm going to brag on my wife again. I know it's annoying, but I'm going to do it. She is killing it with these articles. I mean, it's amazing. I could not.
Praise the Lord.
I could not put this detail together. You know, I've heard anyway that
all glory to God.
Well, yes, definitely. I've heard that women are better at attention to detail, more patient with tedious tasks. Praise God for women. Praise God for my wife, because I could not be patient enough to put this together. But she has provided for you an archive of everything you need in one place, in clear point by point presentations. So let me just shut up and you can take me where we need to learn now. Here's the Tiger Woods stuff.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking to jump into the CRISPR stuff. Like, if there's a section toward the end called CRISPR in the classroom, if you can find that.
CRISPR in the classroom, man. It makes me hungry. It makes me think about
CRISPR in the classroom, man.
Makes me think about Kentucky Fried Chicken, which I would like right now. But that's not what you're talking about, is it? I think I might have something to say about this.
There's no sugar coating.
CRISPR in the classroom.
Keep going down.
Hey, there's a shout out to the Common Core Diva right there. I've got some podcasts for you to listen to here.
Everything that you could possibly need to be an expert, like, on this topic is, like, literally in this document pretty much. Like, it's got so many different links and videos and information. And plus, I'm going to show you a checklist of terms that you need to look for in your community.
Yeah, and eventually...
Like, I literally went to my nail salon and there was a flyer on the table, and it was like, you know, somebody talking about doing a resilience workshop. There it is.
And you know what? As a matter of fact, if we have time a little bit later, I will give everyone, as an example, the educator expert profile on who that lady was, and just to show you what it's like if you want to find this info and find out what these people believe and what they're actually coming there to teach your teachers. We can do that too. But anyway, let's go back in here. I found it. There you go. CRISPR in the classroom. It's not what you think.
Why don't you read it, Brad? You have a much better, a much more lovely reading voice.
Oh boy. Okay. We'll see about that. CRISPR in the classroom. We're talking about the indoctrination of the post-human generation. CRISPR is gene editing technology. If you remember a couple videos ago, we talked about the colossal bioscience.
Guide reproduction wisely.
Yes, guide reproduction wisely. We talked about this extensively in the last show, where CRISPR is the technology that they use to so-called de-extinct these dire wolves a couple weeks or over the past couple years, actually. But no, that's not what they did. They just replaced genes into a dog cell. And anyway, hailed as the future of medicine. The problem is they're going to do this to human beings. Hailed as the future of medicine, agriculture, and even human evolution, is no longer confined to advanced research labs. It's now entering K-12 classrooms and college curricula, embedded into the STEM programs, bioethics courses, and student competitions funded by globalist think tanks and pharmaceutical stakeholders. Under the banner of innovation, students are being conditioned to accept, promote, and normalize editing the human genome, right? How much celebration did you see a couple weeks ago when those pretty cute little direwolf puppies were shown on the screen? They'll eat you up. Anyway, designing synthetic life and merging biology with AI without ever being shown the spiritual, ethical, or social cost. And that right there is critical. All of this, apart from any sort of metaphysical grounding. All right, through flashy biotech kits and classroom CRISPR simulators, the next generation is being indoctrinated to see the human body not as sacred, but as hackable. This is not education. It's ideological grooming for the fourth industrial revolution, aligning perfectly with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 3, health, Goal 4, education, and Goal 9, innovation. CRISPR is framed as a tool for equity and access, but in reality, it is a Trojan horse for transhumanism, designed to erode boundaries between God's creation and man's ambition to be God.
Yes. So then I want to just show people the key education programs to watch out for.
We got it right there.
Yeah, just show them that so you can put your eyes on that, and they really want to normalize this biohacking.
Substack, armoroftruth.substack.com, folks. These articles are there for you right now. If you want to make it real easy on you, just download the Armor of Truth mobile app. These articles will be delivered right to your phone, right to that app. The minute we release them, you'll have them right there in the most easy way possible to read them. It doesn't cost you a thing. It'll never cost you anything to have the Armor of Truth mobile app, and you will get live notifications whenever and wherever we go live. And most of the time, we send out alerts whenever we drop new articles. If it happens to be a particularly big one or a really important one, we will let you know when we drop articles too.
Yeah, so it's scary. It's like the goal is to normalize biohacking as moral progress.
Yeah.
So
that is definitely another one of those points where I have to just bring it up once more. I don't want to bug people too much with this, but it's let me see if I'm in the right place. Where would you like to go next? While I try to.
Well, I just want to show people that there is. If you keep going down, there's terms to be on the lookout for. It's under the Tiger Woods section. Go down. Okay. Well, hang on one second. Let me. Now I'm in a. I can't get out of what I'm in here. Just take me just a second. I'll be right there with you. I'm trying to find yesterday's or yep. There we go. Oh, that's not it. I'll get it. Oh, never mind. Okay, I'll find it later. Okay, where were we? Okay, going down. Terms to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. There we go. Terms to be on the lookout for. There you go. It's all yours.
Yeah. I don't see anything yet on the screen. It's blank.
It's coming in just a second. Yeah, sorry about the blank screen. I was trying to find my teaching materials, but it took me too long. I'll get them. Yeah, so I've got the terms on the lookout for here. This is how you can decode the SDG playbook in your area. And if you'll lead them through a couple of those, Summer, I will go ahead and find some really I've got some stuff here too. I've got some major red flag terms.
Can you back out of the screen so that it's not so close up?
Okay.
Is that possible?
Yep, I can. You mean like that?
Just so they can see the full list. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so the first one, so this is, in your area, when you are just looking at the flyers and the posters on the telephone poles and, the mailers that come in the mail, like be on the lookout for these terms: social emotional learning, STEM, STEAM education, career and technical education. That would be CTE, whole child framework, global competence via OSED, OECD, PISA. You've got college and career readiness, community schools or wraparound services, smart cities initiatives, resilient communities, often used in rural UN programs. So indeed, like I said, when I was at the nail salon, on the coffee table was a flyer for a resilient program. So sustainable development education, portrait of a graduate aligned with SDG competencies. So UNESCO schools or UNESCO Associated Schools Network, ASP.NET, National Career Clusters Framework, World's Largest Lesson or Teach SDGs Curriculum, Whole School, Whole Community, Whole Child. We also have a place in our building called Smart Start. Mm-hmm. So that's another one too. And that's Pritzker. Pritzker is part of funding that.
Do our viewers remember the name Pritzker by this point? Right, Governor Pritzker in Illinois. It's his cousin actually, who is James Pritzker, who lives as Jennifer Pritzker now. They're the Hilton, aren't they? Hilton. I forget what hotel chain, but they're billionaires.
I think it's Hilton. I think so.
And they're definitely involved in the transgender indoctrination, which is another element of all of this, because all of it is pushing towards transhumanism. And of course, Summer, transgenderism is what?
Transgenderism is a fiction.
The on-ramp.
Yes, the on-ramp to transhumanism.
Yeah.
So lastly, you've got the 21st century skills or future-ready schools. 21st century skills or future-ready schools. These are not just education reform. They are soft control systems. They bypass federal accountability. They operate under the radar, and they are funded by public-private partnerships and NGOs and foundations linked to the UN, the WEF, and global finance. So sound the alarm in your area. And I see that you found the video.
Yeah, public-private partnerships, my friends, they're not your friends. That is just the intermediate step between taking everything. There'll be no more public. It'll all be privatized. That means they can shut it off. You have no say-so over it anymore. Right, and I did find this video that we did, pretty good while back now. It's just, let me hit more so I can see. We did this video in December of 2022. This is about digital surveillance of students in public high schools, and it's out of control. Drew Chambers of Columbia University argues that the use of modern security surveillance technology in America's schools, also known as target hardening. Remember what we just read over here from the government's council, or the governor's council, where Public Safety Deputy Secretary Lassiter said we must use the tools at our disposal to upgrade the physical infrastructure of our schools and train our school staff, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's what we see here. This thing is called Gaggle. One of the groups that does this kind of surveillance that they're surely going to use is called Gaggle right here. First, reliance on such technology may undermine more practical responses to school violence. Second, perhaps most concerning, and as an overall consequence, the more it distracts from the main enterprise of schools. These highly invasive tactics are more likely to disrupt the purpose of schooling. And this stuff came out a few years ago. But here's Here's what it's called. Gaggle, surveillance technology.
In describing Gaggle in a couple words, it's easy for me. Life-saving, life-changing.
There you go. That's all you need to hear, right? This is the surveillance systems that they're putting in schools now, where I'll show you, it's shocking. You'll see in just a minute what that actually means. Because up until, they're still not using AI to monitor. They're just using people sitting in a room watching your kids. Does that make you feel good?
Family connecting.
Gaggle to our district is another set of hands that we don't have. It allows us to be able to do a multitude of jobs and to keep our children safe.
To keep them what? Safe? Secure, maybe? Listen to the language. What they're describing is an invisible entity that they count on, that they depend on, right? Another set of hands, but we don't ever see this being. This being is always there lurking, though, and keeping us safe.
And we don't have the manpower to do that ourselves.
Security and support are the two biggest words that come to mind for me.
I would say life-changing. I would say extraordinary.
Do you think they've all been given a list of words? Because they were just repeating the same ones. Hey, there's Oconee County Public Schools, South Carolina. Not far from here. Keep a lookout for Gaggle, my friends. Let me run up here and tell you what. Show you. Let's see if I can find it quick enough. Disenchanted Culture. This is a pretty good video, folks. I'd check it out. You might find. Let me go here and show you how they actually do their surveillance. Yeah, this is great. So they're not only watching kids like with cameras, they have access to see what's in their emails and what's on their phones. And some of you remember yesterday, I think it was one of the shows we were watching, Deb Philman or Lynn Taylor. You remember what they were saying about the fact that they want to take the cell phones away from the kids in school? That the reason for that really wasn't about kids being distracted by the cell phones, but it was really more about removing the possibility of gathering evidence about what's happening in the school. Remember that?
Yes.
Check this piece out here. This will show you what one of the data gathering rooms. Yeah. Surely it's professionals, right? It's all professionals, and they're highly trained criminal justice people, right? But people you can really trust that are watching your kids in school. This is real time. This is really implemented in school systems today.
It's not knowing everything that was going on in your head, and you turned out okay.
No, you don't get to do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's too dangerous out there. Right? They have your best interest at heart. They will tell you what's best for you, right? And then you heard Voddie at the top. All right, this guy right here, he just never stops talking. So I'm going to move ahead and see if I can get to where. This is a pretty good section we should probably cover too. The in loco parentis section, where it's a Latin term. You can't see it on your screen. It's not really helpful, is it? Latin phrase. It means in place of the parent, in loco parentis. And that is the principle that public schools operate on. When they have your kids, they believe that they have the right to do whatever because you've turned your kids over to them. And in loco parentis, the parent is absent. Therefore, we have the authority. All right, here you go. Here's what I wanted to show you. I'm easily distracted.
So we've got a student who's sending some screenshots of some text messages. Looks like they're talking about maybe some harassment that's going on. Because it sounds like this girl.
You see that? They're watching students' text messages in real time. Just live, right there.
He has a boyfriend, and she's.
So they're watching that in real time. Okay, okay. So there's too much of me.
Yeah, this kid is clearly wanting this one particular girl, and says they've tried to kill themselves multiple times and failed. The suicide reference, as well as the sexual harassment. This is something we might want to make a phone call about and actually PSS. Okay. Hi, Brian. This is Maddie with the Gaggle Safety Team. We just sent over an email and it did reference suicide, so we wanted to let you know that that should be in your inbox right now. Okay, great, and give us a call if any questions come up. All right, well, he said they're going to get all over it, so that is very reassuring to hear.
How did those messages get in the Gaggle system, like if they're texts?
Yeah, so in this case, it looks like the student had uploaded those screenshots or attempted to send them in an email to a couple of people, and it actually looks like these might be staff members. So it sounds like the student was intending to report it or just pass the information along, and so that's how we ended up intercepting those.
Gaggle's working in real time.
Intercepting those, she said.
Scanning documents as students write them or emails as kids hit send. When a piece of content triggers the algorithm, it can be quarantined, blocked until reviewers decide it's not a risk. Let's say the student was trying to send these messages to someone on staff at her school, and this tool has effectively stopped her from being able to do that.
While we do recognize that, we're interrupting this communication, at the same time, we don't want to assume that anybody's going to handle it until we've delivered it into the hands of the folks that we know are set up to receive these situations.
Okay, that's probably enough. You get the idea there, right? This is a video we have. Maybe we should drop the link in the description here.
And they mention that was related to, once again, Columbia?
Yeah, well, one of the in our description, it gave one of the someone who wrote an article about this, who was interestingly enough being critical of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it did come from Columbia, though. Let's see. Where's my title? Yeah, the title of this video. This is Armor of Truth Live 211, and it's called "Get Your Kids Out of Public School Now." And you'll see Voddie Baucham's face there. I'll drop this.
Well, it's so funny because when the C-19 thing was happening, it was very noticeable that they didn't care about kids going to school and stuff, and like everything just seemed really lackadaisical, and suddenly everybody was homeschooling, and it just seemed like it was very hands off about the kids. And I think that was on purpose, strategically, because they knew that this next phase that they were going to be erecting around us is so awful, like for us to go through and point out all those points, what we just described to you, how they're taking over. It's like they wanted to disarm everybody and they don't want people to notice that this is like the final grab of our communities, Yeah,
it's it is definitely, COVID was definitely the greatest opportunity they've had to try out a lot of stuff that they couldn't get away with doing before. It set up a lot of opportunities for them. Okay, let's now let me make sure that I don't get out of here without mentioning this other article here, because this is a very important topic that we're going to be coming back to time and time again as well. This is the title of this article that Summer released earlier today is called "Self-Identity is Satanic." This is part 2 in a series on reclaiming the soul. All right. So I'm gonna buzz through this because this is a very good way to kind of sum up the show. All right. And once again, there are links in the description. You can get it through the Armor of Truth mobile app, but you want to read these Substack articles. This is a wealth of information. You'll come away smarter, not dumber, and that's hard to do on the internet. The soul is given. Self-identity is constructed. Okay? Let me see if I can remember now. I wanted to have this graphic. I was looking for this earlier, and I forgot what I did with it, but I will find it right quick because we need this. This is one of my favorite teaching aids that we have here. Yeah, so just bear with me for a second. I know how to find this. I can do it. What I'm trying to do, folks, is figure out how to manage, figure out how to look through Summer's filing method. And Summer's filing method is very simple, and that's why it's so hard for me to understand, because I don't.
Hey, by the way, while you're looking for that, I'll talk about The Klaus Schwab thing, that was another false hope thing that was going around. Like everybody's like,
Klaus Schwab is out.
Klaus Schwab is out. Yay. Everybody's like, yay, globalism is over. Klaus Schwab.
But
It's
Jaws
like-
is in.
Yeah, I mean, so we did an article about that too, which I hope you guys check out. Basically, the replacement is like super scary, and also based on when I looked up his credentials and his history and what he's been up to, he's deeply entrenched with Agenda 2030 with water resource management and stuff. And so a really good article out, very informative, just connecting the dots about what this signifies as far as the next phase of them gaining the full control of water. So they've started that initiative now, clearly.
Do you have any idea where my name? You don't know where it is.
I don't know what you're looking for, actually.
My Nature and Grace graphic. Goodness.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
This is crazy because there's no reason it should be lost. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think you should go ahead and say it.
Yeah, that's frustrating. Okay.
There's so many other lovely pictures to look at.
Yes, definitely. Okay, where are we? Right there, self-identity. All right, so here's the idea, folks. This is what you need to know. This is what they're trying to get you to understand. This is really about, the scientific religion of progress versus God's created order. The soul is something that's given. You can't give yourself a soul. But they try to hold that up there as being equal to self-identity. That is constructed. That's what I meant earlier when I said that sexual orientation is a construct. Sexual orientation doesn't really exist. Okay? The soul is understood as the form and purpose of a person, something that transcends the ego, connects us to God, to creation, to others, connects us to eternal truth. It's not chosen or invented. The soul is received. Self-identity is a modern fiction, just like transgenderism, right? Those categories don't exist. There is no such category as a man-woman. That's not a category. That's what we mean by blurring categories. And when you blur categories, you're up to something no good. All right. But this is a modern fiction that insists, I am what I feel today. It's radically individualistic and unmoored from any stable reality, biological, spiritual, or moral. The soul unifies. Self-identity fragments a person. To be ensouled means to be truly whole. And you remember, we saw in the language over there, whole child approach. They have a different definition for whole. By whole, they mean fully indoctrinated. To be ensouled is to be whole. Body, soul, a unity of mind, body, and spirit. But the ideology of self-identity splits the person into pieces, right? To gender, here, desire, there, trauma, over here, ethnicity, over there. Identity becomes a costume party of fragments, each demanding supremacy. And the result is confusion, anxiety, and social chaos. And this is why I was looking for my teaching aid. The grace-nature dichotomy, where you have grace at the top and nature at the bottom and a line in between. And the philosophers for millennia have been trying to unify the two apart from God. When Christ, when at the incarnation, when God came into the world as the man Jesus Christ, this was representative of the unification of nature and grace. And of course, they're fighting against this as hard as they can. And to do that, you have to ignore or just override the transcendent, override grace. And then when you do that, everything becomes just like you see here, mechanistic, right? It's the identity of self splits the person into pieces. Gender here, desire there, trauma over there, your traumas. This is intersectionality. You're not imago Dei. You're not in the image of God. You don't have individual dignity in the image of God. Your worth is found in all the ways that you can label yourself as a victim or as part of some group. And the result, of course, is confusion, anxiety, and social chaos. The soul calls us upward. Self-identity collapses inward. There is a divine hierarchy. It orients us toward truth, virtue, love, toward God. Self-identity, of course, brings the focus down into nature only. Makes the self both the creator and the God, right? To believe that you can recreate yourself or create yourself, you would have to completely disregard grace or the transcendent. It demands affirmation rather than transformation. Instead of being called to conform to what is higher, the world must conform to the self's ever-changing feelings. Man becomes the authority. Man becomes autonomous. Nature becomes autonomous. Nature has eaten up grace. The soul seeks meaning, self-identity chases power, right? The real question is, who am I in Christ? How can I serve the kingdom? Remember, this is the difference between mimesis and poesis. The idea of mimesis meaning I will go find my place in the society, in the culture, in the world. As a man, I will find a wife and marry a wife, and I will have a home, and I will, this is how I fit myself into the world. Poesis, on the other hand, self-identity, lacks metaphysical depth, reduces everything to power struggles. It's the idea that all of this matter, including my body, is just raw material for me to express myself with. I can shape it however I want to. I can have surgery on it and slice it up and reform it however I want. It also deals with, on the psychological level, with the victim versus oppressor, affirmation versus cancellation. Truth becomes irrelevant. All that matters is who controls the narrative. Right? Because the narrative tells me who I am, not Christ. The soul is rooted in divine order. Self-identity breeds Gnostic chaos. That is a really beautiful sentence there, wife. That's a good one. The soul is rooted in divine order. Self-identity breeds Gnostic chaos. In other words, modern identity ideology is Gnostic. It detaches spirit from flesh, believes that the flesh is ultimately evil. Meaning from matter. It separates meaning from matter and insists that I can define reality from within. And the result is, of course, madness, as we've pointed out. And so this is the first article in this series. Divine Design to Identity. You can find this in the second article here. It's just from earlier this month, I believe. And here is the answer. Why is this important that we expose this stuff and do it in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals and social emotional learning? Because at the heart of the crisis today is a simple but devastating shift. Society has abandoned the concept of the soul, or they've created some false version of the soul that when you die, you this Eastern mysticism blended with Western idealism. You're the most important thing in the world, but when you die, you're going to dissipate into the oneness, into the source. Right? They've abandoned the sacred, unifying, divinely given essence of the human being and replaced it with a marketable fiction called self-identity. Wait till you see where this goes, folks. Wait till you see where Summer's taken this piece. The soul is not a feeling. It's not self-determined. It's the form, purpose, and telos. That word means design. It means purposeful design. All right. It's the form, purpose, and design of a person that makes a human being intelligible, whole, and oriented toward God, which is to be oriented toward truth. In contrast, self-identity is endlessly self-referential. fluid, right? Gender is fluid, they say. It is constructed, ultimately accountable to anything higher than personal desire. Ultimately unaccountable to anything higher than your personal desire. But when desire becomes the basis for reality, truth collapses. And into that vacuum steps an industry. And what is that industry? It is this one, folks. The transgender industry. Selling synthetic selves. The ideological shift towards self-identity has been weaponized by the gender industry, which presents medically engineered identities and artificial sex characteristics as liberation. Liberation gone mad. What we're witnessing is not liberation. It is the commodification of the human person, especially the exploitation of womanhood and the deconstruction of biological reality. In other words, transsexualism, that's not the word you hear today, but that's more like perhaps the proper term that was used before this marketed term of transgender. It's a fetish. And it's now become a techno-medical industry profiting off sterilization, hormone manipulation, and of course the medical industry with cosmetic surgery and all of this. The term transgender rebrands these interventions as identity expressions. You're just being your true self, and it wraps them in human rights rhetoric. Again, folks, all of these blur categories. None of it's true. These identities are not ontological. That means they don't have any real being. There is no real substance to these identities. They are products. They are, as someone wrote, they are fictions. In fact, they are corporate fictions. When you see Nike or whatever, whoever supporting these men in women's sports. You need to check out Jennifer Bielik. She's on Substack as well. She is describes herself as an old third-wave feminist who's writing about this stuff, and much of what she writes is just dead on right, and it can be used for good.
Yeah, I think it's worth clicking on that article real quick because it's only a couple of paragraphs.
Are you sure we don't need to just scroll right down into this weirdness?
Yeah, let's take a breather.
Okay.
Let's take a breather and head into gender rights are AI rights.
All right, so there's Bielik's Substack. Gender rights or AI rights. Back from last November. If sex can be changed at the stroke of a pen, we undermine the very concept of biological truth. That is to say, what we're saying here, of ontological truth, of what is even possible in the realm of being and substance. And fairness, she writes, which would be the same from our perspective. Undermining biological truth is the mission of gender ideology. The LGBTQI plus political infrastructure of today is being used to drive body dissociation toward human symbiosis with AI, with which Silicon Valley has been promising us since the early 2000s. Children are being groomed for industrial body dissociation to think of their wholly sexed anatomy as commodities: interchangeable breasts, penises, chromosomes, hormones. There you go. Hormones, vajayjays and gametes, etc., etc. That was comfortable. For
the key phrase here being, the dissociation of all of this traumatizing stuff that's happening.
Yeah, the bottom line is here, the transgender industry is a male-dominated industry where men covet women's bodies. Right? They
covet their parts.
You don't really see a lot of billionaire women dealing in the transgender industry, do you? That's because that's not for them. It's through tyrannically compelled language. That there is another type of being that is beyond male and female. Didn't you know? It's the truth. No, they've lost connection with categories, which means they've lost connection with truth altogether. There is no third category. Contrary to popular thought, this is not about anyone having body dysphoria or special identity or protections for people who are same-sex attracted. It is a virtual reality being constructed out of institutionalized language that deconstructs what it means to be human as we now think of ourselves. And I would just remind you, folks, what we're reading here to you from Jennifer B. Look, as I said, she's as she describes herself, an old third-wave feminist. She's not writing from a Christian worldview or a Christian perspective at all. She's just writing from the perspective she has as a feminist who recognizes this, right, as the movement that she says was corrupting their movement back in the day, and that it's turned into all of this. So she was able to recognize these points. So the entire point of gender ideology to deconstruct the way humanity thinks of itself. That's the point. And I'd like to jump into one.
Well, just read a little bit more down into that, because she's going to go into the entire point of the gender ideology is to deconstruct the way humanity thinks of itself. Children are ground zero for this indoctrination. Gender ideology, the ideology of promoting industrial body dissociation, has been institutionalized in children's health curriculums in schools, their libraries, TV programming, social media, and presents wherever children are in the culture. So changing children's perceptions of themselves as whole biological sex systems is what gender ideology does. Many, having been sterilized after adopting synthetic sex identities, will be reduced to future consumers of technological reproduction if they desire children of their own. They also become willing commodities as they freeze their eggs and sperm for future technological reproduction in anticipation of sterilization through medical harm. Because when they do these procedures, they're pretty much sterilized, whether it's hormones or surgeries.
Yeah, this last piece here, too, this reminds me of Dave Rubin, the commercial transactions of surrogacy, using women's wombs as gestation devices so two homosexual men can pretend to have children, right? Will also be important to an industry sterilizing young people, participation in the macabre rituals of medical castration. So sad, right? Because again, let me finish here, believing that they can mix and match parts of their anatomy toward a transcendence from flesh molds them as consumers and to see themselves as commodities. That is very well said by Jennifer B.
Right. And what we know about CRISPR, put that with CRISPR, how they're trained, they're in the rural communities, is that STEM program where they're training up kids to work in the CRISPR industry and to be desensitized to, doing experiments on human beings. That's going to be normalized. We just saw that in our document earlier. So this is all leading to that generation beta, which will be the first operational human generation. That's their goal anyway. That's the goal.
Absolutely. All right. Just a reminder, folks, the QR code you see on your screen is connected to armorup.live. If you'd like to donate to us live while we're on the air, you can do that using that QR code or just that link. You can go to our https://armorup.live, and it'll make it very easy for you. If you want to leave us a message live on the show, you can do that. And you can stay anonymous if you like. But I just wanted to say, after reading that, because it's so relevant here, I want to go ahead and just handle why sexual orientation is a construct. Because, again, we started the show off explaining how to go about talking about these issues. You need to establish what is true and what is not true. You need to establish categories from the start. Separate the creator from the creation, because their worldview, the one, they don't know they have it. They don't know they're being indoctrinated or discipled into a spirituality. But that spirituality is cosmological monism. They're being trained to think that they're one with the universe, that their bodies are raw material. They can just mold it to be what they want in the universe, and the universe will reflect back to them the joy or whatever. I want to tell you that sexual orientation isn't real. You've heard it. I've heard it. We all have heard it. We've all accepted it. What I'm telling to you, the modern concept of sexual orientation is a philosophically incoherent, theologically heretical, and morally hazardous construct that divorces human sexuality from, here's that word again, from the teleological design purpose, creational, and covenantal order established by God. This term, like this, sexual orientation, represents a category error, treating disordered desires as identity. And ultimately, it opens the door to the normalization of deviant sexual behaviors, including adults with minors, under the guise of immutable personal traits. All right, a couple terms. Sexual orientation is typically defined as an enduring pattern of emotional, romantic, or sexual attractions to men, women, both sexes, or whatever these days, right? Or to none. That's part of the A in LGBTQIA. That would be the asexual group. Again, ridiculous, right? That would be no orientation at all, would it? Which proves to you the fact that the alphabet group, the fact that the acronym or whatever keeps growing, proves that sexual orientation isn't real. It's not a construct. And I know that might be difficult for some of you to receive, because you think, well, certainly it's real. We all are oriented one way or the other. It's not. It's been embedded into your brain, and you think it's real because it's so common. Let me continue just for a second. So we're talking about category errors. We've already talked about that, presenting one thing as if it belongs to another category, which it logically cannot. Teleology refers to the design or purpose inherent in the created order, particularly in natural theology and biblical anthropology. So, the phrase sexual orientation emerged prominently in the 20th century as a pseudoscientific redefinition of human sexual desire, deeply influenced by Freudian and Keynesian anthropology. You remember Kinsey, right? Some of you may have seen the movie. Kinsey was one who was contracted to do a study, a survey on sexuality in America, and he was a very perverted individual himself, and so all of his findings were just, well, beyond the pale, over the top. That's for another day here, right? But it's all, the idea of sexual orientation comes out of those fallacies, those fallacious ideas, those reasonings, that incorrect, insufficient anthropology. But it implies, all of this implies, and we have uncritically accepted, that desires define who you are. Desires define your identity, right? I'm straight. Well, that's who I am. He's gay, so that's who he is. He likes boys, so that's who he is. You see, that's where it logically goes if you allow this term to go by and be presented without correcting it.
Or what we've talked about. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah, go ahead.
Is I'm an alcoholic.
Excellent.
When you work
Yes.
the program, which is another offshoot of these theosophical types, they were channeling the 12 steps, and once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. You're either if you don't go to your meetings, you're gonna have institutions, death, or jail, and that's it.
So that's the addicts. For the Alcoholics Anonymous sacred text, jail, institutions, and death is equivalent to hell. And
because you couldn't possibly be saved by Christ and be redeemed.
There is no redemption in AA. There are, and usually in cults there are not. And in this movement here, it's the same. Like in ethnic Gnosticism, or in this type of spiritual underpinnings here. There is no like if you're canceled, there's no redemption. There's only penance. You can only pay penance. That's all there is. So that's a very good point, right? Yes. Anybody. This is why we in our points you can find this on our Substack. We've got a pretty popular video about this topic. It's about 17 minutes long. It's not too much of an investment of your time. Summer's exactly right. We don't argue that Alcoholics Anonymous should not exist because we know it's a fallen world, and people who deny Christ, they need somewhere to gather. They're not going to become better for it. They might kick alcohol, but it's not going to make them any better off in the end. But a Christian cannot drop anchor in AA because it is an alternate social religion. And that's because you must identify yourself with the core identity of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. That means I belong to this group, and I will forever belong to this group. If you quit drinking 50 years ago, you're still an alcoholic. Not even God can change that fact. So that right there, my friends, that's an idolatrous false religion. One of many, and they need to be called out for what they are. So that's a great point, Summer. Sexual orientation is just like the term alcoholic. It doesn't exist. We've been trained.
What you see is this. I think that was one of the first social experiments because they had this, this group think within the meetings and everything, and they all parrot one another, and you can't go outside the mantras and the thinking. So now they've just expanded that,
Yeah. So and one of the ideas here in these terminologies here, these desires, like in sexual orientation or alcoholism, these identities are fixed, morally neutral, and they even deserve to be legally or culturally recognized. This is why you'll have alcoholics come to you who are in AA, and they will fight for that program and tell you that, well, it works, and therefore it's the truth. And I would just say, well, if a guy went to the Scientology's alcohol program and quit drinking, does that mean that Scientology is the truth? Does that mean that they're the right place for you to be? I mean, you see, proper categories are crucial for this. And so with sexual orientation, it's not morally neutral. They say it is, but it's a radical departure from the biblical view that human beings are defined not by their desires, but by their design. Not by their desires, but by their original design. You are born this way, and that's what you are. As creatures made in the image of God, created male and female, Genesis 1:27. Created male and female for a fruitful union in marriage, Genesis 2:24. Scripture never speaks of sexual desire abstracted from moral accountability or divine purpose. To make orientation a fixed identity is to make disordered desire ontological. In other words, that's to give substance and being to sin and evil. Evil is not a substance, and evil has no being. Evil is the privation of good. It's where good doesn't exist, or it's where people choose against the good. That's how evil exists. It's not a thing. Okay. Again, so category error. Here's an analogy. Claiming to be defined by one's orientation, it's like saying, hey, I'm gluttony oriented. I'm gluttony oriented. Somebody could say, hey, I'm porn oriented. That's just my identity, so it's all good because that's how I was made, said Lady Gaga. Or you could say I'm wrath oriented, and that way you could justify your anger and your violence toward people, right? Because it's just who I am. So it's not morally wrong.
Well, the other thing is how, recently with the DSM diagnostic manual, whatever that is. I've totally like rewired my brain when it comes to the phenomenon of the DSM-5, but they've taken out what it means to, the idea of the narcissist, because they've conditioned
Because it's so
society to
common.
be so narcissistic.
Yeah.
That's the norm,
Yes, that is a good point. Yeah, you can't have a category for narcissism because that's what they're training. They're training up narcissists. Oh boy, those are good points. Well, the Enlightenment. Well, let's say Francis Schaeffer again. We're talking about him a lot lately because he is his apologetics work and his writing, and Augustine from the 3rd century. Very important to what we're talking about today. This idea of cracking these fallacies. Schaeffer and others in the Reformed tradition highlight that grace and nature were meant to be unified under God's rule. But the fall fractured this harmony. The Enlightenment secularized nature. Nature became a brute fact. It's not connected to transcendence or God's grace at all. It's just, nature just is. It's a brute fact. In fact, they'll tell you the universe created itself. Nature is self-evident. And have you ever heard anything more ridiculous in your life? Things don't just pop into existence out of nothing. Things have to be created to be brought into existence. Anyway, so nature is a brute fact removed from grace or the transcendence. The result is that terms like orientation now live in this anthropological void. Desires untethered from design. Disordered affections, not ontological categories. But Christ, the Logos, restores the union of grace and nature. John 1:14, Colossians 1:15 through 17. Sexuality, therefore, is not a personal compass. Sexuality is not a direction for your life. It's a created faculty with divine intention, namely covenantal marriage between male and female for procreation, for unity, for pleasure in that arrangement, and sexuality is created for reflection of Christ's relationship with the church when it's in that particular arrangement. Read Ephesians 5. Once you accept that sexual orientation is a fixed, morally neutral identity, then you've accepted these following 3 premises. Be very careful of these. In other words, once we as Christians, even if you're not a Christian, okay, and I know, and I'm hoping that some folks who are involved in calling out this social emotional learning and stuff who are not Christians will come across our material and hear some of this, because this applies to you also. Because I think many of you might be accepting these terms when you don't have to, and you shouldn't be. But if you accept a term like sexual orientation uncritically, you just allow people to use it and you accept it as some category, that means that you're accepting, you're agreeing that desires define what is natural and good. That means that the guy who desires to rape and murder, well, that's just natural and good because it's him, it's his truth. All right. Secondly, if you allow that term to go by uncritically, you've accepted that any persistent sexual desire must be protected and normalized under law, including, you know what. And third, you've accepted that opposition to any orientation will be discrimination akin to racism. If you allow the term sexual orientation to be used and you don't challenge it, then you're accepting, you're allowing that adult, minor relationships have to be protected, should be protected in the same way, should be treated in the same way as racism. This is why we need proper categories. What are the consequences of accepting these premises? If gay is an orientation, that is to be affirmed. If gay is an orientation, that's to be affirmed. Then minor attracted is the same. And this is already happening. The DSM-5 uses, I can't use the term on YouTube, starts with the P, adult child attraction disorder. In the DSM-5, they imply that it is a clinical and potentially neutral category. Some academics and activists now today even have been labeling P as a sexual orientation, meaning that it should be protected. That's a pretty slippery slope, isn't it? Terms like minor attracted person or MAP are defended as identity markers. Not sins, not actions. It's someone's identity. It's just who they are. Just as gay was once distinguished from homosexual behavior. The same linguistic shell game is at play. If you read Romans 1, you can see this. This is why it matters, folks. This is why we can't just allow these terms to be used as if they have a real ontological meaning. The Bible never asks, what is your orientation? The Bible asks, what is your nature, male or female? The Bible asks, what is your heart's posture? Jeremiah 17:9. Well, heart is desperately sick. Who can know it? Your heart, your feelings, in other words, will deceive you. Jeremiah 17:9 says that. The Bible tells us that. This is why we need to depend on the transcendent source. The Bible asks not what is your orientation. It asks what is your obedience? Romans 6:16. The orientation model implies neutrality and it implies permanence. It implies that this is a state that will never change. But God calls even deeply embedded sinful desires to be crucified. Galatians 5:24. Scripture sees no category of neutral, sinful inclination. Even the desire for another man in a man is condemned. Romans 1:26 and 27, and in other places. One of the few that is referred to as an abomination. A biblically faithful anthropology requires us to speak of sexual purpose, not sexual orientation. To view sex as vocation and covenant, not identity. Treat sinful desires as things to be crucified, not codified. The Bible teaches that our bodies have a theological meaning. In other words, we have a purpose to fulfill here, and that is to praise God. That's the purpose. That's the chief end of man, is to praise God. Worship Him. To enjoy God is the chief end of man. So the concept of sexual orientation, as Summer has pointed out in these articles so well, in the same sense, this idea of sexual orientation collapses everything into natural mechanistic qualities. It collapses logically because it treats mutable desires as immutable identity. That's an equivocation fallacy. Category errors again. It makes category errors by converting actions to essence. It removes moral teleology or design and purpose from natural function, undermining the moral order. So, I know that's a little long, but if orientation is real, then nothing, no desire, can be morally evaluated apart from the consent and persistence. In other words, if someone agrees or if someone feels it for a long time, then it's true if you allow them to use these terms. It's just who they are. This makes even bestiality, incest, or adult and child attraction defensible under the orientation umbrella. So we have to reject it. We have to reject the term, not just because it's being misused, but because allowing it to be presented as some kind of category that elevates desire to the level of ontology or actual being allows for morality to just be deemed non-existent. It's a false anthropology built on the ruins of Christian metaphysics. Biblical theology of creation, sin, and redemption calls us to reject this modern idol and recover a vision of human sexuality as a holy calling, not as an identity label. And I guess I think that's important because really at the heart of these movements that we're talking about here it's that idea of, you'll see that a lot in there, that they'll try to train these kids they will train these kids to think of themselves as sexual beings, at an age where that should not be considered. And then some remember we were listening to the ladies talking yesterday, and they mentioned one child who had mentioned another word I can't say on YouTube that means self-harm.
Ending life.
That means self-harm.
Unaliving.
Unaliving oneself, yes. That these kids would never have, like, I know when I was that age, I would never really thought, those ideas never really crossed my mind, and they wouldn't for most kids. But now a lot of kids think about it and talk about it, and it comes because they're constantly being told about it. They're being asked constantly, do you feel that way? Are you thinking about that? And if you say that enough to a kid, you might be thinking, well, maybe I guess I should be. Or they might think, I seem to get more attention when I say that.
Or maybe because they don't want to be forced to think in slogans.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what it boils down to. These kids are literally being taught to think in slogan responses, like just little sound bites.
This is the foundation of a counterfeit kingdom, and we're seeing it all over the place, and it's good to call it out. And again, folks, these articles are fantastic. To finish up this piece here, the spirit behind all of this is Antichrist, and it's already in the world. 1 John 4:3. The goal of the system is to erase God-given identity, male, female, or child of God, to dismantle the biblical order, family, church, nation, to replace God's law with man's consensus. Right? That's what the science is. It's consensus agreement. It's not truth. Prepare the world for a centralized global system of worship and control. Make no mistake, it's not going to be neutral. It's not going to be a-religious. It's going to be very, very religious. The enemy has used language, education, finance, and media to build a false kingdom, rebuilt with algorithms, ESG scores, and global education standards. Time is running out, my friends. This is why it's important. As Summer writes here, do you want to cover this convergence piece, or would you like for me to do it?
Well, you can read it.
Okay.
But I like this piece right here. It's interesting.
Yeah, this is a good wrap up here. 2025, the prophetic convergence. All right, the urgency to speak God's truth. For example, this is a good point, into technology, into AI systems. We have shown you this on our channel that these AI systems don't necessarily just return woke answers. They reflect us. And if you give it a Christian worldview, it will work within that framework. Speaking God's truth into AI systems has never been greater. The urgency has never been greater. Alice Bailey's esoteric writings prophesied 2025 as a critical year for the externalization of the hierarchy, a revealing of spiritual beings to guide global consciousness. Alongside this, the now infamous Deagle Report projected massive depopulation in the Anglo-Saxon countries in 2025. Whether that happens through war, economic collapse, or biomedical tyranny, the powers of this age are preparing something cataclysmic. The groundwork is being laid digitally, educationally, and spiritually. If we don't engage locally, publicly, and in the technology, in these media platforms, in the educational content, and in public life, then we're not fulfilling the Great Commission.
I just want to interject here. When we were talking about that document, the document earlier that I was reading to you that they're implementing at the local level, what was really interesting is when I was looking into this, the implementation of the religious aspect of this stream version, it's being happily integrated into progressive Christian schools, so nominal Christian schools, Roman Catholic being the premier one, Islamic, and Jewish schools. They're all happily adopting this Agenda 2030 STEM SEL program. So I just find it interesting. But the premier one, as far as the religions goes, the big kahuna tuna that's adopting the SEL STEM program with glee is the Roman Catholic Church.
Well,
so remember when we think about the empire of the city and how you've got London, Washington, D.C., and the Vatican. And, again, what we've talked about with He Gets Us and how the mobile app that's associated with He Gets Us and that's associated with The Chosen leads you to the Roman Catholic app that is all about open and affirming and, social justice Jesus. It's a totally different Jesus. It's this woke Jesus. So just file that away in your brain.
File it
away. File it in your brain.
It's so
you can't not see that. Like Protestant Christianity, Bible believing Christianity, we no longer have a seat at the table. The church that represents Christ in the world is the Roman Catholic Church, and we know that
it does.
That's
what people assume when you say Christian in most parts of the world. They assume Roman Catholic.
1.3 billion people.
Yeah. I think in this worldview, another reason that it's been able to be so embedded, especially within the school system, within academia, is Charles Darwin. Well, not Charles Darwin necessarily, Darwinianism for sure, but his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. Just quickly, listen to this little piece. He had an idea called it's known as vital materialism. This is Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus. He had the idea of evolution. He was already thinking about it in the 1700s. But his idea of evolution was something like known as now we call vital materialism. He was an ardent opponent of Christianity too, right? He was instrumental in launching the Industrial Revolution in England. Erasmus Darwin was also concerned with issues of popular education. Again, Charles Darwin's grandfather. We're talking about the theory of evolution, macro. We're talking origins. Throughout his life, he maintained a lively correspondence with, guess who, Summer? Jean-Jacques Rousseau, whose philosophy he espoused with full conviction. And that philosophy is that man is born basically good and he can create himself. It's society that corrupts him, so we need to change all of that. Not the man. We need to change the society. We need to shape it. This is fascinating when you think about it. Charles Darwin admired his grandfather, who had died 7 years before he was born. But they were careful not to associate Charles Darwin's name too much with Erasmus. And that's because of Erasmus Darwin's self-conceived theory of evolution. Erasmus Darwin wrote a book called Zoonomia, or The Laws of Organic Life. Listen to this. Although there was no scientific proof, Erasmus considered the upward evolution of life from microscopic particles in the primordial sea to the modern appearance of man to be a scientific fact. In other words, Erasmus Darwin believed in this idea of vital materialism, that matter can create itself. This is the grandfather of Charles Darwin. Okay. And that was because there was some fluid that lived in all of matter. He called it the ether. This belief was based on the unshakable conviction of humanistic naturalism, which became his substitute for religion. Same thing that we see today. It's back. It's nothing new. Erasmus Darwin incorporated his evolutionary ideas into a more complex philosophy of organic bliss. Evolution was not a casual speculation, which influenced his whole philosophy of life. In other words, the human soul, according to Darwin, was of a physical nature. External objects would be objectified in thought as nerve cords were set in motion by vibration. Is this sounding familiar to you? Vibration? All aspects of our existence are products of example of mental illness, that the belief in the existence of a real hell was a mental illness. He saw the real cause of misguided minds in catechetical or teaching religious instruction. Children could not effectively defend themselves against the religious instruction of their parents. The spiritual development of a normal person is disturbed, if not destroyed, if you introduce them to religion. Now here's the big finish, folks. Erasmus Darwin, greatly influenced his grandson Charles Darwin, believed that reason must take precedence over imagination. Only science can be the right remedy against religious faith. What is commonly called sin is only due to neurological vibrations and can also be cured by appropriate therapy. Is that not, come on, is that not amazing how much that's like social emotional learning? Wrong behavior.
Yeah, because
go ahead.
We know that with Brock Chisholm, we've talked about this ad nauseum about him taking, the director general, first director general of the WHO, and it's like we're going to use psychiatry to reform everyone's thinking that psychology and psychiatry has always been a weapon of the ruling class. And then you have Marx, who weaponized philosophy to bring it a metaphysical meaning to create this new religion that we're all living in now. So they used philosophy as the counterfeit for God's word and truth. And then they forced it on everybody through psychology and psychiatry and therapists and life coaches and all these other people that, have been able to glean authority and that have come under a lot of scrutiny, especially recently, people going, no, actually these people, this is just a junk science. This is pseudoscience.
As is the theory of macroevolution, the idea that matter can create itself, is ultimately, you see, that's where Charles Darwin's theory went. So as you said that Marx weaponized psychology, the Darwin family...
Philosophy.
What'd I say?
You said psychology.
Philosophy. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Philosophy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was the Darwin family and the Huxley family, because T.H. Huxley was known as Darwin's bulldog. Darwin didn't go around defending his theory, but T.H. Huxley did. So the Darwin and Huxley families weaponized science by injecting this theory of Darwinian naturalism. Now listen to where all of this goes. You've heard how this where the origins of this theory of evolution. According to Darwin, Erasmus, moral guidelines can only be derived from universal love. He had an enormous influence on the scientific world of his time. He was England's greatest and most original thinker of the period in which he lived. Now, think of this impact of vital materialism in the time that Erasmus Darwin lived, late 17, early 1800s. Vital materialism, Darwin's worldview, made its mark in a seminal way in the Romanticism of the late 18th century. At the time of Erasmus Darwin's greatest popularity, the poet William Blake, in his poem The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, put a distinctly Darwinian idea into the devil's mouth, saying, energy is the only life, and reason is the bound or outer circumference of energy. The famous English surgeon, William Lawrence, is one of those who fell under Erasmus Darwin's spell. Another was this Dr. William Lawrence's patient, Percy Bysshe Shelley. Now it'll come home. Percy Shelley's wife, Mary Shelley, was the author of the novel Frankenstein, a work she reportedly wrote while pondering Erasmus Darwin's ideas. She and her husband discussed Darwin's experiments and concluded that, quote, perhaps a corpse could be brought back to life. This would require electroshock therapy to, quote, to quote, reassemble the associated parts of a creature and give it vital warmth, unquote. Darwin had suggested to the great writer that life, physical, mental, and moral, could arise from matter alone without divine intervention. Shelley's famous poem, Prometheus Unbound, endorsed the basic idea in Darwin's Temple of Nature that the world could regenerate itself through universal love. What is that universal love? Well, electroshock therapy. Or however they want to define it. Because again, you can see there in these people who are supposed to be so brilliant, to have such an impact on science in his lifetime, who have broken down truth by destroying ontological, biblical, anthropological categories. And that's because, full circle, what Erasmus Darwin did was he denied and rejected the very first binary, the very first category distinction, which was the creator-creature distinction. So let me remind you folks, while we're still here, please check out these articles on Substack. This is really where the bulk of our work lives now. You want to know what we're thinking and everything we're saying about what we're talking about, this is where you're going to find it. And we're very much interested in exposing and blowing up this STEM, STEAM, and STREAM, these policies, this agenda, as we can see it present in our area as well, because as Summer pointed out, they are now infiltrating the rural areas through these, with their, which agenda is it, Summer? What was it? I can remember. What are they?
The K-12.
Yeah, that's right. And so here are some of the articles you can see that we've been working on here lately. Here's the article about the burning of Schwab. This is a very good one you want to check out, folks. This one, a lot of people think, here it is. It's a good subtitle. False flags, false hope, water as the new gold. Right, so there's Schwab, and there's the new Schwab, or the interim Schwab. Schwab is out, but former Nestle CEO Peter Brabeck-Lemma is in as interim chairman of the WEF. And I guess very quickly here, Summer, I guess the idea of this piece is that people really believe that because Schwab is in trouble for, spending nonprofit money on lavish things, that somehow this is going to bring down the WEF.
I know, it's silly.
But then they bring this Peter Brabeck in, who was the CEO of Nestle. And what was it that Nestle controlled? Summer, what was it that Nestle controlled more of?
A lot of water.
More than any other corporation in the world, Nestle controlled water resources.
He's also known for his involvement in initiatives related to water resource management, having chaired the 2030 Water Resources Group, another public-private partnership under the World Bank.
He who controls the water controls life. All right, so there you go. This is another excellent article with details that you just probably won't find in a lot of places. And this will let you know who this guy that's the interim chief of the WEF is, what he's really about. Just great articles. They look really good. This is high-quality stuff. And we're really happy to be able to provide this for you. Here's, again, the Empire of the City. Hidden global power structure. There you go. City of London, Washington, D.C., and Vatican City. Folks, you're getting a lot of great stuff here, absolutely for free. And I just...
Yeah, it's got 2 likes. So, give us a like over there, man.
Well, it's because, it's difficult. It's difficult to break through, but we will. Okay, well, we have really gone over the line tonight as far as time.
Yeah, we've really gone way too long.
Yeah.
We've gone way too long.
Yeah, breaking all the rules. But, folks, we'll definitely see you early next week. Our goal is to hit Tuesday and Thursday right now, and then to fill in wherever we can. But we'll see you again live next Tuesday. You make sure you look on this channel. Keep an eye out for upload videos that will come out. We will keep the content rolling. Get to the Substack. And if you can support us in any way, there are links in the description to help you do that. But download the Armor of Truth mobile app. That's how you get notifications whenever and wherever we go live. And all of these articles, or most of these articles when they come out, that's how you keep up with what we're doing and what we're talking about. And there's exclusive content over there. Bible studies, you get these articles. And maybe in the future, we're sort of talking and researching and debating back and forth right now. We would need more viewers, a little more interaction from our viewership. But moving into the smart TV realm, where you could have an app to watch us. We don't have that yet. We're just talking about it. That would require quite a commitment. But we are happy to do it if we've got the people who want to see it and want to engage with it. So thank you for being with us tonight, my friends. Summer, anything you want to say on the way out? Maybe good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for being with us, as always.
Or good morning. Thank you, folks, for being with us. We'll see you again here very soon. God bless you.